Let me take you through the headlines so far. If you are just joining us, nearly 200 seats have now been declared, and it's been a bad night. Let me return that, a terrible night for the Labour Party. They've seen some shock results in the North East in particular so far, a huge drop in their share of the vote. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has arrived in Islington in North London for the results of his count, and questions are being asked directly by Labour MPs and former Labour MPs over the future of his leadership.
Jeremy Corbyn should announce that he's resigning as leader of the Labour Party from his count today. There's absolutely... He should have gone, and, you know, he should have gone many, many, many months ago.
And the Conservatives have made big gains, putting them on course to win something like an 86-seat majority predicted in the exit poll. You may just have heard Ian Duncan Smith, their former leader, retaining his seat despite a big attempt to get him out by Labour.
I'm pleased, therefore, incredibly grateful to them that they have returned me once more to represent this constituency. And I'm also incredibly pleased that it looks like that I shall be doing so starting from Monday in a Conservative majority government. Thank you very much indeed.
Phew, just, well, no time to catch our breath. Let's talk to the former Conservative MP, former Attorney General, now the independent candidate for what was his seat as a Conservative, Beaconsfield. Dominic Grieve joins me now. Did you see any of this coming?
Yes. I think it was fairly obvious from the very start of this election campaign that it was being commenced on a footing that was undesirable for those who had an argument to make in respect of moderation. And the main reason for that was because the Labour Party was being led by a person who is not moderate in his views and therefore is a bogeyman to a very large number of the electorate. And that, from my point of view, standing as an independent, was always going to be a very considerable challenge because the fear of Jeremy Corbyn means that people feel that they're between the devil and the deep blue sea, and therefore they're more inclined to the deep blue sea, even though they don't trust Mr Johnson. So there was always going to be that issue, and indeed it's featured very prominently in the course of the campaign.
OK, I mean, you talk about challenges and your personal feelings. I mean, personally, do you think it's a challenge in Beaconsfield that you haven't been able to overcome?
Yes, I'm sure that's the case. It's a pretty tall order anyway to take on a 25,000 Conservative majority that I built up over 22 years, and the area is deeply Conservative.
Why did you bother?
In its political inclinations. Because it was a debate that is well worth having and has to be had, and indeed, this election is not going to resolve it. If anything, it shows an even higher level of polarisation. And bear in mind that the polarisation is now, it seems to me, to be becoming even very acute, both in the context of Northern Ireland's relationship with the rest of the United Kingdom and also that of Scotland. So, as I'm a unionist, that's a matter of great concern to me and something that was a very good reason for standing. That was the reason for doing it. Otherwise, I could just have walked away, and I never wanted to do that.
John Bercow wants a word.
Dominic, you and I have known each other for over 30 years. And we've been colleagues together in the House of Commons for over 20 years. Let me just say this to you. If you have been unsuccessful tonight, not going to continue as the Member of Parliament for Beaconsfield, I think the House of Commons will be poorer. I think the country will lose out because you have been an outstanding public servant. Independent-minded, principled, articulate and unfailingly courteous to everyone with whom you're dealing at all times. You are really an exemplar of how politics and public service ought to be conducted.
OK, well, that from John Bercow, but you're not going to be an MP, Dominic Grieve. You know, what does this tell us, then, about you and other independents from all parties? It seems we're back to the big two. If you leave, you're going to get thrown out.
That may be the case, although it doesn't mean that in the future independents may not prosper in certain circumstances. It certainly highlights the difficulty that independents have. I've always accepted that. In taking this on, I had I had a desire to do this because I thought it was right. I also had quite low expectations. But it's always worth going forward and making democratic debate, because the future of our country depends on it, and I am very worried about our country's future. I think it's at serious risk, both in the quality of life of its citizens and indeed our future as a United Kingdom.
What are your thoughts about the nature of Brexit? No doubt the withdrawal agreement will be passed by the House of Commons very soon, but it's the shape it then takes after that. And, you know, the one theory doing the rounds, isn't there, that with this size of majority, if it does turn out to be that, and it pretty much looks that way, might even be a bit low, that exit poll, the way things are going.
Yeah.
It frees Boris Johnson up. He doesn't even have to pay any attention to the ERG.
Well, I don't know about that. Time will tell whether Mr. Johnson's policy succeeds. And on that note, I'm going to have to leave you because I've been called over to the table for the candidates. So I wish you a pleasant evening for the present. Thank you very much.
Great talking to you, Mr. Grieve. We have to go as well because there's so much more to discuss. Beth Rigby...
He's a busy man with many commitments.
He is a very busy man, but he won't have any commitments in the House of Commons. And that's a serious point. You know, just on this squeeze again by the big two. Well, the biggest squeeze coming from the Conservative Party, but all these independents, Chuka and Munna, they're failing, and many more to come.
It's always the way, though, of course individual MPs have incumbency factors, but you cannot kind of overcome the party machine. And you saw in the City and Westminster seat that Chuka and Munna didn't win, that had one of them stood down, Labour or the Lib Dems, had they done an official pact or a non-aggression pact, one of them would have won, but the vote was split. But there's another thing that's happening tonight as well, which John touched upon, there are many a great parliamentarian, whether you agreed with their politics or not, that are now leaving the Commons. There's a big churn. Brexit really did
Let's bring John in on that. I mean, and particularly from the Conservative Party, we saw those that were thrown out lost the whip while they were MPs, some of them standing again, some of them didn't decide. Do you think that's just overall just a terrible loss of parliamentary talent?
That is my honest view. I've always admired people who I think are dedicated, conscientious, articulate, principled, intelligent public services, whatever their view. If they're dedicated public servants, whatever their view, it's a pity if we lose them. To lose Dominic Grieve, to say goodbye because of retirement to Oliver Letwin, to lose Justine Greening, and a great many others, is a loss. Amber Rudd's gone, because she's chosen to stand down. I think it's a great pity. By the way, I just saw...
Just looking at Jo Swinson there arriving for her count, the Lib Dem leader. Some of the exit polls saying she might be in some trouble. Continue, John.
Dermot, may I just mention somebody who is perhaps not known throughout the nation, but I think I saw in the distance that Hull East had been retained by the Labour Party, and if that's so, that is Carl Turner. Now, Carl Turner, who is by background a barrister, and a person of a very...
Just got to say there's some flash photography, John, for our viewers. Live pictures there, but no, continue about Carl Turner.
No, I just wanted to mention Carl Turner, a barrister by background, a very agreeable fellow by disposition, is nevertheless the noisiest member of the House of Commons. And I have advertised that fact to audiences around the world. Carl goes from 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds, and it's his usual refrain to yell at the government, "Shocking! It's a disgrace," and then to point at the minister and to say, "Behave."
OK, smiles on Jo Swinson's face there. Now, listen, it's just over 5 hours since we brought you the results of the Broadcasters' exit poll, the astonishing results on the bottom of your screen there. And plenty of those results are now in. Our team of election analysts have been tracking those results and is ready to update the prediction contained in the exit poll. And we at Sky News are now forecasting the Conservatives will win between 358 and 368 seats, and Labour between 192 and 202. That would mean a Conservative majority of between, depending on which end of the forecast you go with, of between 66 and 86. So a range of 10 seats in it for both those parties. Let me take you through them again. Sky are forecasting clearly a Conservative win, a very large majority. The Conservatives and Boris Johnson will win between 358 and 368 seats. Labour 1922202. And Sky's election analyst, Professor Michael Thrasher, is with me now. Tell me how you've worked this all out, Michael.
Well, we're looking at actual results, and we've been waiting to get enough results from every region because we're using a regional swing model, and it's really quite close to what the exit poll is saying. Although we may be saying that actually the majority may be slightly lower than the exit poll had forecast. So, if you like, the mid-range forecast that we're looking at currently would be a majority of 76.
Well, I mean, you're amazed by the way this is panning out. This is the fourth election when the Conservatives are going to be either forming a majority or the largest party. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this?
No, this is an exceptionally unusual election. For me now, I think the critical figure psychologically and, of course, electorally is whether Labour will pass, the important mark of 200 seats. And on the upper end of our projection, a forecast for Labour is 202 seats, but they could be as low as 192.
But even on 202, even on the high end of that, that's still worse than Michael Foot in 1983.
And still, yes, and you'd have to go back to 1935 for such a low result as that. So, but we are getting closer and closer to being able to sort of pinpoint where the parties may actually finish up. But this is actually after just 200 results are in, so less than a third.
And we're seeing it happen because Sir John and I were conjuring just on the numbers from the exit poll, and you're more or less staying on those, where the seats are being won and lost, because it seems the Conservatives are losing some seats, particularly in Scotland and indeed parts of London and the South East, but boy, they're compensating for it elsewhere.
Yes, but they're also, I mean, for example, Labour held on to the...
Stay with us, Michael. Better go to Ishan Walton, Foreign Secretary, again targeted by these tactical voters. Here we go.
The number of votes cast for each candidate at this election was as follows. Ashurst Peter Renardard, 2,838, 2838. Peter Warren, also known as Baron Badger, 326. 326. Harding Monica Bernadette Ethelreda, 28,389. 28389. Keynes Kylie, 347, 347. Rob Dominic Rennie, 31,132.
Well, he has held on there, a big effort there to get rid of him. The Liberal Democrats running him very close on 28,000. The Labour vote dropping down to 2,800. Dominic Raab back there. Another important seat. Taylor. Richmond Park declaring. Zach Goldsmith trying to hold on for the Conservatives.
Olney, Sarah Jane, Liberal Democrats, 34,559. Shaw, Caroline Teresa, Independent, 247.
There we go. You can see for yourselves the Lib Dems have taken it. Sarah Olney ejecting Zach 61. Goldsmith from Richmond Park. He's rather yo-yoed there, bringing a by-election himself, which he lost over the issue of expansion of Heathrow Airport. He got back in. Well, he's out again now. And first Lib Dem gain of the evening. Let's go to Anna Botting, talking about the big beast now. Anna Botting is in Uxbridge in West London. We're talking about the Prime Minister's seat, Anna. What's going on there?
The people of this country
We're actually talking about the Shadow Chancellor's seat, John McDonnell, Hayes and Harlington. The result just come in. John McDonnell won it, but while he was making his acceptance speech, talking about people waking up in poverty, food banks and climate change, people started shouting at him. First of all, terrorist, and then liar, and then a fight broke out. Take a look at these pictures from the count.
You're lucky, then you're terrorist. It is quite clear that there are fears also now for our democracy and the rise of the extreme right. But I say now that we will organise and we will ensure this type of democracy will reign, that our democratic wishes of our people will be respected, and this sort of extreme right-wing violence will not be tolerated within our society. Thank you very much.
So the response there of John McDonnell as he walks away, but it shows really the febrile atmosphere that we've been brought to during this campaign, and now he, of course, blaming the far right. We have to say, do not know who it was who was scuffling there in the background, but even during the postal voting, we saw arguments here as well, so clearly tensions running high. Kate McCann, you're here certainly. Very extraordinary scenes here at a count with somebody so senior, Shadow Chancellor.
Yeah, you can really feel the tension in the room, and you could see there from that footage just how kind of violent really that fight was. It was a proper punch thrown. Somebody was punched in the head. John McDonnell, before that happened, was making a speech which sounded very much to me a bit like a leadership pitch. We've heard Labour MPs across the country say, Ruth Smeeth very pointedly before, that Jeremy Corbyn should have announced his resignation.
Leaving Uxbridge to go to the result in Islington North, Jeremy Corbyn's seat.
Announcing the results of Islington North. Thank you.
I, Lindsay Roberts-Egan, being the acting returning officer at the election of a Member of Parliament for the Islington North constituency, held on Thursday, the 12th of December 2019, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Nicholas Charles Ellsworth de Elves, known as Nick the Incredible Flying Brick, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, 236. James Clark, Conservative and Unionist Party, 5,483. Jeremy Bernard Corbyn, Labour Party, 34,603. Joseph Haim David, Brexit Party, 742. Caroline Russell, Green Party, 4,326. Nicholas Richard Wakeling, known as Nick Wakeling, Liberal Democrats, 8,415. The total number of ballots rejected is as follows. Want of an official mark, 0. Voting for more candidates than a voter is entitled, 37. Writing or mark by which a voter could be identified, 2.
So Jeremy Corbyn there holding on to his constituency in Islington North with over 34,000. No surprise, of course, that the Labour leader is winning here in Islington, a seat he's held all the way since 1983. But while he's not under pressure here, he's clearly under pressure in the rest of the country with a very disappointing night for Labour, losing many seats outside London, whether in Wales, in the north of England, and also in Scotland as well. A disappointing night for the Labour leader, and there will be calls, including from his own colleagues, for him to resign. Let's have a listen to him now.
Could I start by saying a huge thank you to the returning officer and all the staff and the police that have ensured a fair and democratic election has taken place today, and also to congratulate and thank my fellow candidates for their participation in this election. And also a very heartfelt thanks to the people of Islington North for electing me again for the 10th time to represent Islington North in Parliament. I'm very, very proud to do so, and I've learned so much from the people of Islington North, and it's my pride and my pleasure to continue to be their representative in Parliament. I also want to thank Ruth Hayes, our agent for this election, and all of the wonderful friends, comrades and supporters in Islington North Labour Party for the huge effort they put in this election campaign, and they put in all the time to carry a message of hope and justice all over our constituency, and through me, I hope, to a wider world. The pressure on those surrounding politicians is often very, very high indeed. The media intrusion on people's lives is very high indeed. And the attacks that take place against family and loved ones of politicians continue, and they're disgraceful, and frankly, they are disgusting. I want to take this opportunity to thank my family, my close friends, and those that have been close by and been very supportive during this and every other election campaign. I want to thank my 3 sons for the huge support they give me, and thank my wife, Lara Alvarez, for all that she puts up with because of the way in which the media behave towards me, towards her, and indeed towards my party during this election campaign. And this is obviously a very disappointing night for the Labour Party with the result that we've got. But I want to say this. In the election campaign, we put forward a manifesto of hope, a manifesto of unity, and a manifesto that would help to right the wrongs and the injustices and inequalities that exist in this country. For those who need housing, those who need an effective health service that will deliver for them, and those children that need a school that is properly funded and they're not being taught in oversized classes. And a manifesto that gave hope in dealing with the environmental crisis the world faces by investing for the future through a green industrial revolution. All of those policies were extremely popular during the election campaign and remain policies that have huge popular support all across this country. However, Brexit has so polarised and divided debate in this country. It has overridden so much of a normal political debate. And I recognise that has contributed to the results that the Labour Party has received this evening all across this country. The issues of social justice and the issues of needs of people will not go away just because Brexit is dealt with in the way in which Boris Johnson presumably plans to deal with it at the moment. All those issues will come back centre stage in the debate, and the fundamental Labour message about justice and equality within our society is going to be one that is there for all time, because it's the very core of what my party believes in and what I will always advocate on behalf of my constituency and on behalf of my party. I want to also make it clear that I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward. And I will lead the party during that period to ensure that discussion takes place and we move on into the future. because I'm
we're
very
going to
proud
go from the Labour leader currently, how much longer we're asking, to the former and most successful leader of the Labour Party ever, former seat, Tony Blair's, of course, Sedgefield. Is it about to turn blue?
At the said election is as follows. Bull, David Richard, Brexit Party, 3,518. Furness, John Charles, the Green Party, 994. Howell, Paul, the Conservative Party candidate, 19,609. Joyce, Michael Anthony, Independent, 394. Welsh, Dawn Elizabeth, Liberal Democrat, 1,955. And Wilson, Philip, Labour Party, 15,096.
Well, as I said, what a symbolic result. Tony Blair's old seat, just as we were listening to Jeremy Corbyn talk, it's turned blue. The Conservatives have gained this from Labour. Phil Wilson, ejected as the MP. Paul Howell will now take over in the new House of Commons. A majority, a healthy majority, 4,513. This year, 1935 keeps coming up. Well, that seat has been Labour since then as well, and this is looking like turning out to be the worst performance by Labour since that year, 1935. And while we've been speaking, or while we've been listening to Jeremy Corbyn, you saw the Prime Minister arrive at his count. We will, of course, bring you the result from Boris Johnson in Uxbridge in his speech when that happens. But meanwhile, the inroads that Boris Johnson's party is making into Labour territory continuing. Barrow and Furness has fallen, and the Conservatives have gained back a high peak, a loss for them in 2017. It goes on and on, Beth.
It really does, but I mean, Jeremy Corbyn has just effectively announced that he intends to resign as party leader. He just confirmed at his count, I will not fight another general election as leader of the Labour Party, but he didn't seem to be resigning immediately. He said that he would stay on for a period of reflection. So maybe he intends to stay on and try and just get his people into place for any leadership contest. So not an immediate resignation, but, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn has just there announced his intention to resign. Now I'm waiting for the time frame.
I mean, John Burke, on that, if it's, I mean, in this exit poll and now our projection, it is going all Boris Johnson's way. Now, you got in. We mentioned Tony Blair, that's what I want to mention. You got in that landslide, went, I suppose, against the trend a bit. Pretty safe seat in Buckingham. But yeah, you got in 97 and you saw, a smashed party. How long does it take to recover from a drubbing like that?
Oh, it can take a very long time. It's always very tough if you suffer a heavy defeat in terms of size of majority to get back into government in one go. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's a very tall order. So far as the timescale for the election of a new leader of a political party is concerned, I don't think there's anything particularly odd about what Jeremy Corbyn has just said. I mean, if you think, for example, of the Conservative Party in 2005, after a notable and quite heavy loss, Michael Howard announced that he would step down, but that he would oversee a process leading to the election of a successor, and he finally stood down several months later. So I don't think there's anything particularly quirky or irregular about that. It seems to me to be a perfectly orderly thing to do. But what Jeremy was signalling was that he didn't intend to try to lead his party into a subsequent election, and that seems to be crystal clear.
Yeah, a lot of self-searching perhaps going to go on pretty soon in that party. Let's concentrate on what is going to remain clearly on this projection, the party of government with a big majority there. You can see that mane of hair on the right-hand side of your screen with his back to us, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. We're expecting his result very soon. We're going to hear that all, hear the result and hear his speech afterwards. As you may know, Anna Botting is there. Over to you, Anna.
Lots of hair ruffling, I have to say, but inwardly that man must be absolutely delighted. It does appear that we are looking at the next Prime Minister for Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Boris Johnson. It's his dream job. He was already Prime Minister, but now he has his own mandate. Kate McCann is here. You've been following him for the last 5 weeks. There was nervousness, was there not?
Yeah, there was, and I think a lot of people, including these politicians, have been burnt by previous polls and, of course, what happened in 2017. But the Conservative Party in this general election have focused their resources on those Midland areas and the north, which Boris Johnson needed to win, needed to turn blue, and it looks like he has.
And they played an offensive game, didn't they? Really going after those Leave voting seats in the Labour heartlands. So was it Brexit? Was it Jeremy Corbyn? Was it both? Or was it this man? Did he make the difference? Because Theresa May tried to do the same in 2017. What difference has it made then that Boris Johnson is the leader of the Conservative Party right now?
I think certainly anecdotally, speaking to people in some of those seats on those visits, it has made a difference because lots of voters, particularly those who voted Labour for a significant amount of time, have said that they are voting for Boris Johnson, not the Conservatives, not the Tory party. So yes, it's made a difference. It's also about timing. We're much further on in the Brexit process.
And I know, Kate McCann, that you heard people out and about campaigning with Boris Johnson suggesting they were not voting for Jeremy Corbyn because he was anti-Semitic and too close to terrorists. The shout we heard tonight at John McDonnell's constituency. So, Sophie, what reaction has there been where you are then to the news that Jeremy Corbyn will not stand or not continue to stand for much longer as Labour leader?
Well, I think that there was a bit of shock really in the room. Jeremy Corbyn has now just left the count. You can probably hear the chairs being packed up behind me, but a really significant piece of news unfolding in the last 30 minutes or so, because as those Labour seats fell like dominoes, Jeremy Corbyn stood on the stage behind me and announced that he will not be leading the Labour Party into the next general election. He said a period of reflection is needed. There is clearly, my understanding is, some soul-searching going on about the regional disparities in the Labour losses that we've seen this evening and what needs to be done about them. He says he will stay on as Labour leader while that period of reflection goes on, but he will then clear the way for a challenger. And I have to say, there have been two counts going on here tonight. Islington North, Jeremy Corbyn's seat, but also Islington South and Finsbury, which is the seat of Emily Thornberry, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. She gave a speech moments before Jeremy Corbyn, which sounded an awful lot like a leadership pitch, saying that we're not beaten, the fight is just starting against the duplicitous, gutless, reckless Prime Minister that is Boris Johnson. My sense here is very much that with Jeremy Corbyn effectively announcing that he is going to be departing the political stage soon, the race to succeed him is going to be kicking off pretty quickly.
Very interesting, Sophie. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the noise you can hear in the background now is actually that Boris Johnson's dog is at the count, Dylan, who we saw, obviously he took him voting with him earlier today. But certainly for the Prime Minister, the person, I say the Prime Minister, we don't know yet, do we? It's not totally confirmed. Dermot, back to you for the moment.
OK, Anna, thank you very much indeed. Lots of developments. They just keep coming in. Don Valley has fallen to the Conservative Party. Caroline Flint going there. And you may remember at the start of the campaign that a lot of flooding in the area, and it was thought that the reaction by the government might have had a lasting effect on the election. Who knows about that? Anyway, Caroline Flint, of course, supporting the withdrawal agreement bill against the Labour whip in many votes. Wasn't enough to save her, though, in that Leave-leaning seats. There you go. Look how far the Labour vote fell. 17.8%, nearly 18%. The Conservatives didn't actually go up very much, but the Brexit Party have come in there. Nigel Farage deploying his party against those Labour seats and taking 13.7% of the vote. Is that what made all the difference? Lib Dems up a smidge, as were the Greens. Also hearing, just in terms of seats we've been watching closely, Fife North East. Now, this was the most marginal seat in the country. Well, something a little bit to cheer for the Liberal Democrats. Two, that's right. Majority of two there for Stephen Gethins. Well, he's out, and the Lib Dems are back in. Is there a little bit to cheer for the Liberal Democrats taking that seat? There you go. Let's have a look at it. So, By the standards of that seat, a thumping majority for Wendy Chamberlain, 1,316. Four figures, she'll be happy with that. Stephen Gethin's 18,447. I mean, the other side of that coin is that it's clearly not Beth Rigby going entirely the SNP's way. They're predicted to get something over 50 seats tonight, up from 35. So it is going to be a good night. You know, not there in Fife North East.
Well, look, though, I mean, in the big scheme of things, 35 seats in 2017. They were hoping to get in the mid-40s. The projection puts them back in the 50s. I mean, you know, Scotland is going SNP again, and what was interesting was there was a sort of expectation that the Conservatives...
Great Grimsby, Beth. We all want to see this, don't we? Yeah, absolutely.
1,070. Barker, Christopher Paul Howard, the Brexit Party, 2,378. Emerson Lloyd Layton, the Green Party, 514. Nietzsche Leah, the Conservative Party candidate, 18,150. On Melanie, Labour Party, 10,890. Win, Nigel James, Independent, 156. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. One with official mark, 0.
That's all you can say to that one. There was an intake of breath here, John Burker. Melanie on out, 10,891. And look at that change. The Conservatives there, 18,150 in Great Grimsby. It just does keep going on and on, excuse the pun.
Yeah.
Labour since 1945.
Yes, a pro-Brexit avalanche has knocked out Melanie on. She stood up for herself. She argued the case for a less anti-Brexit position. She signalled a willingness to go along with some sort of withdrawal agreement. But I think that what the evidence very clearly shows is that when the tide is running strongly in one direction and the public are against your party, very appropriately in Great Grimsby, and the tide's running against your party, simply standing up and saying, oh, but I don't go along with this, however well-intentioned, is unlikely to avail you.
And there we are again, looking at the
Flynn.
change in share. Look at that, down 16.7%.
Yeah.
I mean
Boris Johnson was in Great Grimsby, wasn't he, on Monday, handling the fish in the fish markets. I mean, I have to say, people like Melanie on, there's lots of Labour MPs in Leave seats that probably wish they backed Theresa May's deal now. Don't you think?
Indeed. Sorry, let's just point out there, you can just see Jeremy Corbyn at the back of that throng leaving his county in North London there when, as John Burker was saying, reading between the lines, he's letting us know that after a period of reflection, he's going.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's how I interpret it.
That's how you interpret it,
It seems to be a perfectly dignified statement that he's made. But just to go back to those losses for Labour, Caroline Flint's share of the vote was very sharply
in Don
down
Valley
as well. Very sharply down in Don Valley.
Indeed. OK, well, listen, let's do some analysis. Sam Coates is crunching through all these numbers, and we've been looking, Sam, at this issue of the Brexit Party standing only in these formerly Labour-held seats. What effect are they and others having?
Thanks, Dermot. Well, it's been fascinating to look in this election at both the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats. And it looks as if the Conservatives were quite right to be worried about the impact of the...
Sam, over to Uxbridge, Prime Minister's seat. Let's listen in.
Give me back Elmo and come down.
Ladies and gentlemen, I, Lloyd White, being the acting returning officer for the election of a Member of Parliament for the Uxbridge and South Ruislip constituency, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate is as follows. Harvey Jonathan David, commonly known as Count Binface, Independent, 69. Hughes David Stephen, commonly known as Lord Buckethead, The official Monster Raving Loony Party, 125. Burke Norma, Independent, 22. Courtney Jeffrey Dennis, UK Independence Party, 283. Humphreys Joanne Ilone, Liberal Democrats to Stop Brexit, 3,026. Johnson Alexander Boris de Pfeffel, commonly known as Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party candidate, 25,000. 25,351. Keir Mark Allen, Green Party, 1,090. Milani Ali Reza, Labour Party, 18,141.
Right, we don't need to go any further then. We can clearly see the result there. They didn't lay a glove on him in reality, Ali Milani. They're in a huge effort by the Labour Party to decapitate Boris Johnson there to get him out. A huge attempt to mobilise some tactical votes there. But you see the Liberal Democrats, well, 3,000 of them still stayed with Joanne Humphreys. But the Prime Minister returned, as I say, didn't really lay a glove on him there. 25,351 for Mr Johnson. We should hear from him very shortly indeed. Let's just take you through some more of the numbers. We'll keep our eyes on the left-hand screen and turn that into some analysis for you, or will we? Here he goes.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all very much. And listen, I don't want to tempt fate, because clearly lots of results are still coming in, and we're still only dealing with projections. But at this stage, it does look as though this One Nation Conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate to get Brexit done. And not just to get Brexit done, but to unite this country and to take it forward and to focus on the priorities of the British people, and above all, on the NHS. And yes, we will recruit 50,000 more nurses and 6,000 more GPs, and we will build 40 new hospitals. And I'm proud to say that one of those across the country, and one of those hospitals will be right here in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. And I'm grateful once again to the people of Uxbridge and South Ruislip for returning me to serve you. It is an absolute privilege to do this job and to work for you. And I thank once again the police, the council, everybody who's worked so hard all night to count for us, the returning officers. I thank my fellow candidates in all their glory, Lord Buckethead, and others, Elmo and others. Forgive me if I don't identify them all. But above all, I want to thank the people of this country for turning out to vote in a December election that we didn't want to call, but which I think has turned out to be a historic election that gives us now, in this new government, the chance to respect the democratic will of the British people, to change this country for the better, and to unleash the potential of the entire people of this country. And that is what we will now do, and if we are lucky enough to be returned, as the exit polls seem to suggest, then that work will begin tomorrow. Thank you all very much. Or rather, I should say not tomorrow, today. Today. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, the Prime Minister there returned in Uxbridge, and as you heard, they're rather cheekily, perhaps, they're staying with those campaign pledges that were so questioned, in particular about the 50,000 nurses. He said they'd be new ones, 50,000 new nurses and the 40 hospitals. Well, that's by the by, because there was a big attempt, as we were saying before we heard the numbers there, to get rid of Boris Johnson, and they didn't really get very close. And as I must say, as the Prime Minister was speaking, the news just keeps getting better and better, and there's the defeated Labour candidate Ali Milani. Just before Anna Botting is there, I want to hear from her, but Joe Swinson, East Dunbartonshire, the Lib Dem leader.
I think
55. David Murdo-MacLeod,
UK Independence Party, UKIP, 208. Liam McKechnie, Scottish Family Party, 197. Callum McNally, Scottish Labour Party, 4,839. Carolyn Scrimger, Scottish Green Party, 916. Joe Swinson, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 19,523.
Hear the cheers there. That's because Joe Swinson, we were talking about a so-called decapitation strategy, an attempt to remove Boris Johnson. Well, in terms of leaders who've gone, that's the second one. Nigel Dalton, Westminster leader of the DUP, has gone. And the SNP, as you can see there, have taken East Dunbartonshire. Joe Swinson will no longer be an MP. Well, so many questions being asked, even during the campaign, about the nature of the Lib Dem campaign. Well, we'll talk about that an awful lot more later, but there we are. Joe Swinson is out of Parliament. Another gain for the SNP. Well, we knew from the exit poll it was going to be a good night for the SNP. They had to win the seats somewhere, and they've won one of them, gained one of them from East Dunbartonshire. The SNP triumphant there. Let's listen to the winning candidate, and then one presumes from a rather upset-looking there, yes, a rather upset-looking Joe Swinson. Here's the winner.
And to all those working the count tonight, and to the polling stations all across East Dunbartonshire today, thank you so much for your patience and your commitment. This is an absolute privilege. Thank you to the good people of East Dunbartonshire for putting your trust in me as your new MP. I'll work tirelessly to represent you all. This sends a clear message to Boris Johnson that the people of East Dunbartonshire reject austerity, we reject poverty, and we reject all of the damage that the Tories and the Liberal Democrats have imposed on the people of Scotland. On a personal note, from me, what I say to Boris Johnson is hands off our NHS. But emphatically, this is a clear message that the people of East Dunbartonshire want to choose our own future. Not the future of Tories. The Tories have been imposing on us. This could not be a stronger mandate for us to do so. So Boris Johnson, you listen loud and you listen clear. Scotland has had enough of your policies being imposed on us. We deserve better, and East Dunbartonshire has said that by electing me as their MP. I have so many people to thank, from my partner Sean, who's been there for every single high and every single low, to my parents who've always taught me to believe in myself, from my brothers, my boss and my close friend Rona Mackay MSP, my extended family and friends, my election agent Gordon and my campaign manager Dennis, and to every single activist who chapped one door or 10 doors for me, who delivered one leaflet or 1,000 leaflets for our campaign. Thank you all. Because of our hard work and dedication and commitment to this campaign, we're one step closer to our independence due to your hard work. To any young women out there watching this, you've got two women here with very different ideological views, and myself and Joe Swinson. But what you can take and what we show you together is that young women can smash boundaries, they can smash barriers. So don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't or that you're not good enough. Believe in yourself the way that me and Joe have, and know that there is no limit to what you can achieve. And finally, just to finish off, there's one person that I really wish was here tonight to share this with me. I lost a very close friend during this campaign who believed that I could be the MP for East Dunbartonshire long before I thought I could. So John, this one's for you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank the returning officer and all of the staff that have been involved in this election campaign, the emergency services, and all of my fellow candidates, and congratulate Amy wholeheartedly. It is an amazing job. I'm sure you will love doing it, and I wish you well. And what you said about young women and smashing boundaries, I wholeheartedly agree. I would also like to thank my agents, Liberal Democrat campaigners and activists who have made this campaign special with the additional challenge of doing it as leader of the Liberal Democrats too. I particularly would like to thank my mum, my sister Nicola, my husband Duncan, and our two darling boys, Andrew and Gabriel. And I would like to thank the people of East Dunbartonshire for putting your faith in me for 12.5 years to represent this wonderful place. I have enjoyed serving our communities. I've enjoyed having the opportunity to make a difference, whether it's here on local issues, whether it's supporting people working on the national minimum wage by introducing penalties for rogue employers, whether it's women in our economy by introducing gender pay gap reporting. Tonight, we have seen that it is likely that Boris Johnson is on course to get a majority. And it is clearly a good night for the SNP. Some will be celebrating the wave of nationalism that is sweeping on both sides of the border. And I do congratulate all those who are newly elected. These are very significant results for the future of our country, and I will be making further remarks later today. But let me say now, for millions of people in our country, these results will bring dread and dismay, and people are looking for hope. I still believe that we, as a country, can be warm and generous, inclusive and open, and that by working together with our nearest neighbours, we can achieve so much more. Liberal Democrats will continue to stand up for these values that guide our liberal movement: openness, fairness, inclusivity. We will stand up for hope.
Jo Swinson there, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, no longer an MP, though, just narrowly lost her seat there in East Dunbartonshire to the SNP, a majority of 149 for Amy Callaghan of the Scottish National Party. So not too good night for the Liberal Democrats, just got an awful lot worse. Personally, for Jo Swinson, she's not returning to Parliament. And many questions then about her leadership, but a very big win then, very big scalp for the Scottish National Party, and predicted to do well. Well, they're already doing very well in Scotland. They're obviously up 9 seats so far. They've taken 4 from the Labour Party. They're just hearing, though, for Jo Swinson, the Lib Dems have taken St Albans. But I want to go now to the leader of the Scottish National Party, Nicola Sturgeon, and this was her reaction to that result in East Dunbartonshire, her candidate getting home. Well, she joins me now live. Nicola Sturgeon, I take it you were a tad pleased about that result. Didn't look very magnanimous, though, did it, your reaction?
Yeah. Look, I'm delighted for Amy Callaghan. She's one of the bright young stars of this election, and I predict great things ahead for her. But can I say, notwithstanding that understandably excited reaction, commiserations to Jo Swinson. I understand more than most the pressures and the challenges of leadership, and to lose her seat tonight when she's led her party through this campaign will be a bitter blow for her. So on a personal level, I really do feel for her. Well, but of course, I can't help but be delighted by the performance of my party.
Yeah, exactly. We'll take that as a celebration for the party. And as I said, there's the prediction and there's the reality. What, you're up 9 seats so far already, plenty to declare. If you get above 50, which it looks like, and some, what does that mean then for your campaign for another independence referendum?
Well, if we win the election, and it looks as if we're on course to win the election and win it well, you know, the exit poll may slightly overstate where we end up, but we're going to win this election, and we put forward a very clear proposition, and people in Scotland will have made very clear that they didn't want Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, that they don't want Brexit, and they want Scotland's future to be in Scotland's hands. And there is a mandate now to offer the people of Scotland a choice over our own future. That mandate already existed and it has been reinforced. I absolutely readily accept that not everybody who voted SNP yesterday will support independence necessarily, but there is a clear desire and endorsement for the notion that Scotland should not be landed with a Boris Johnson government and ripped out of Europe against our will. We should have a choice over our own future, and that mandate has to be respected.
Just while you've been talking to us, you may not have noticed or been told, here your party's taken air from the Conservatives as well. Maybe time for another little jig, perhaps not while you're on air.
I'll keep myself a bit calmer this time. Thank you.
But I mean, in a sense, it's not that bad. You say, well, OK, you know, Boris Johnson is pretty clearly going to get back into Downing Street with a big majority. Brexit, in terms of the formal exit from the European Union, is going to take place. But in a way, if Scotland wants to remain, doesn't that then help you in your campaign for an independence referendum?
Well, I'm bitterly disappointed at the result UK-wide. I think Tory governments are bad for the UK. I know that they're bad for Scotland, and I really don't want the UK to leave the European Union. But I've got to accept that England appears to have voted in a particular way. They appear to have voted for a Conservative government and appear to have voted to endorse the UK leaving the European Union. So Boris Johnson may have a mandate to take England out of the European Union. He emphatically does not have a mandate to take Scotland out of the European Union. Scotland must have a choice over our own future, because it can't be any clearer than it has been made in this election today that Scotland doesn't want a 5-year Boris Johnson government and doesn't want to lose our status as a European nation. This is about choice. It's about saying very clearly it's not for Boris Johnson to decide Scotland's future, it's for the people of Scotland to decide it.
Well, so many questions flow from that. I might only have time to put one of them to you. As we just watching, by the way, Boris Johnson's car taking him back into central London. We don't know if he's going to Downing Street or to Conservative Party headquarters to congratulate the staff there. But Nicola Sturgeon, how does it happen, given we're looking at Boris Johnson's car anyway, not the man himself? But we know he's not changing his view. He's not going to grant you. He's not going to grant you another referendum.
I think. Look, I'm not. It looks as if, and we don't have all the results in Scotland yet, but it looks as if the position that I've put forward of offering people in Scotland a choice has yet again been endorsed by the people of Scotland in this election. So that question really has to be for Boris Johnson. He has no right to stand in the way of that choice. He's every right to oppose Scottish independence, and I think he has to think carefully. I think the Scottish Conservatives, who've suffered significant defeats tonight, have to think very carefully. This is about respecting mandates and respecting choice. Scotland cannot be kept in the Westminster system against its will. It can only be kept in that if it chooses that. And that is the choice that must be given. And I think the Tories really have to think long and hard about the position, because it is not a sustainable one in the long term, and probably not in the short term either.
Judging by the cheers behind you, you might have won another one. But I do have time for the second question. May I put this to you? And this is on the issue of rejoining the European Union. Scotland will obviously still be part of the UK that leaves, and you know that's a thorny issue. You had cast iron reassurances, if you get that far, if you get independence, that the EU will let you back in, and indeed without joining the euro.
Look, no country can be forced into the euro, and I have no doubt at all that if Scotland chooses to be independent, we'll be welcomed with open arms in the European Union. Of course, we will have to go through the process if we are out of that. But, you know, the European Union is an organisation that has existed to enlarge itself. It was always fanciful in 2014 to say that we wouldn't be allowed to be in the European Union. And, of course, back then we were told that rejecting independence was a way to protect our European membership. So these scare stories about Scotland not being allowed into the European Union will simply not wash again.
OK, I just see it's because you've taken the cheering, because SNP have taken Glasgow North East. Another one, another Labour one down. It is quite astonishing, isn't it, over the course of, 5 years or so? You've wiped Labour out.
Well, you know, Labour, I'm afraid, is responsible for its own position in Scotland. Labour has lost touch with people in Scotland. It's found itself floundering on the issue of independence, on the issue of Brexit, and it's got some very hard thinking to do. I mean, look, Scottish Labour is now in existential crisis in Scotland, but that, thankfully, is not for me to worry about in the immediate future.
Indeed.
And, you know, I'll continue to do what I can as First Minister to make sure Scotland is not in the position of having to put up with a Tory government we don't vote for and a Brexit that we don't want.
OK, we've got a question here coming into you from John Burko, our guest for the evening, Nicola Sturgeon.
No, actually, it wasn't a question from me to Nicola. I just wanted to say that while acknowledging the enormous triumph of the SNP in East Dunbartonshire, which deserves to be acknowledged, I did think that Jo Swinson made an extremely gracious concession speech on which she should be congratulated. That's a very difficult situation, and I think she handled it to her enduring credit.
I conceded that. I mean, obviously I'm delighted for the SNP candidate there, but I think it's a very difficult situation for Jo Swinson. I do personally, as a leader of a party, feel for her right now. And, you know, it's difficult for women in politics, perhaps even more so than male leaders. So I've got a great deal of sympathy, and I agree that I think the speech she made there was incredibly gracious.
And just lastly, on the nature of the progress you're making there, you're interpreting it quite clearly as an endorsement of another independence referendum, but you've also mentioned, of course, the issue of Brexit. Scotland doesn't want to leave. Isn't partially your vote about that? It's not entirely an endorsement of independence.
Yeah. Well, of course it was an emphatic rejection of Brexit, but, you know, given how England has voted, it looks as if Brexit is going to happen, and therefore that makes it all the more important that Scotland has a choice about its future, because we've demonstrated yet again we don't want Brexit and we don't want to be outside the European Union. I will absolutely readily concede that not everybody who voted SNP yesterday will necessarily vote for independence in a referendum, but people must have that choice, and that's the fundamental issue of principle that was very much to the fore in this election and will be to the fore in the days and weeks to come.
Nicola Sturgeon, great talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Leader, the rather triumphant leader of the Scottish National Party. It's gone 4 o'clock. You're watching the Brexit election on Sky News. Let me take you through the headlines so far. And our Sky News forecast is predicting that the Conservatives will win the 2019 general election by a majority of between 66 and 86 seats. Boris Johnson, as you may have just seen, has retained his seat, with the Conservatives making big gains overall, putting them on course to win a large majority in line with the forecast. Jeremy Corbyn held on to his seat as well, but has announced he will not lead Labour into the next election.
I want to also make it clear that I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward. And I will lead the party during that period to ensure that discussion takes place and we move on into the future.
And Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP are celebrating, and some, after Lib Dem leader Jo Swinson lost her seat to the Scottish National Party.
For millions of people in our country, these results will bring dread and dismay, and people are looking for hope.
OK, we are the Conservatives are just short of this formal moment. So when they have definitively won this general election, they've got to hit 326 seats. That's half the number in the House of Commons plus one. They're less than 100 seats short, you can see, of that total. And the prediction is that they'll go way beyond that. Beth, your thoughts so far, as we've just seen seat after seat in these Labour heartlands fall?
Well, let's just also pause on Jo Swinson. I mean, Jo Swinson has lost her seat. She's going to have to stand down as Liberal Democrat leader, and I think we're going to get that in the morning. She said she was going to make further remarks. Ed Davey, the deputy, he will be, no doubt, taking over as a caretaker. Leader, let's watch to see what happens, is Luciana Berger, the former Labour MP. Can she win Finchley, and can she run for the leadership of the Lib Dems? I mean, that's something I'm watching. And then the Labour Party. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn there saying, I intend to resign. He's going to have a period of reflection. I can't get any sense from the Labour Party about how long this period of reflection will be. But maybe, as I was saying, it's to get themselves in order to try and put a Corbyn candidate in to try and keep the movement going, despite losing 2 elections on the back of a Corbyn manifesto, to be frank. But big shock tonight, Laura Pidcock, Durham North West. She was a Corbyn backer. She is someone from that wing of the party that has been anointed, that was going to be pushed. that was potentially the future of that movement. She might have stood for the deputy leader. She's out. She has lost her seat in Durham North West. So there are serious upsets and movements in the rival parties to the Conservatives. But as you said, the Conservatives, I mean, Boris Johnson is heading to being the most successful
pretty much master of all his surveys, perhaps. And John Burke, just on that issue of these decapitations, I'm calling it, perhaps that's the wrong word. Joe Swinson gone, Nigel Dodd's gone for the DUP, Jeremy Corbyn saying, well, he'll be gone, well, before the next election, presumably well before that. It's a night of real drama.
Well, politics is a legalised blood sport, and it can be very brutal, and the consequences can be both very serious and very speedy. So there are always surprises at every election. I was particularly struck by what Jo Swinson had to say and by the manner in which she said it. But the rest, I suppose, naturally flows. One would expect Jeremy Corbyn to have made some reference to the situation, and he did. And as I said earlier, and I repeat, it doesn't seem to me there was anything particularly odd or peculiar about the way in which he responded. He said, well, look, I'm not going to fight another election, and as to how we proceed, well, that will take a period of time. There has to be, after all, a process. You can't just appoint someone as leader. There will be an election, and I rather imagine that will take place in the months to come.
John, thank you for the time being for that, and of course some dozens more MPs, perhaps not at the top of their parties, going and already lost their seats, the majority of them in the Labour Party. And on that note, we at Sky News are now forecasting the Conservatives will win between 363 and 369 seats. Prediction, Conservatives 363 to 369. Labour will have between 193 and 199, below that 200 level. 193, 199 for the Labour Party. Now, that would mean a Conservative majority. The spread between those predictions of between 76 and 88. And Sky's election analyst, Professor Michael Thrasher, is going to be joining us very soon. But, I mean, it's just that we've been talking about this is the fourth term for some form of Conservative government.
Honestly,
I mean, it's unprecedented.
I mean, hats off to Boris Johnson and his team. This is an unbelievable victory for him. As I was saying at the beginning of the programme, he was on the back benches a year ago. It wasn't clear that he would ever get a tilt at the leadership. The whole Brexit drama and the way it unfolded, the way he positioned himself as a true Brexiteer, it got his foot in the door at number 10. And boy, has he converted that leadership win. He's now converted it into the biggest majority for a Conservative party since 1987. Just take that in. I mean, he has become the most successful Conservative Prime Minister since Margaret Thatcher. That is an unbelievable achievement by him and his team. And yes, he has done it on that Brexit message. And yes, it might be that this is people lending the vote because they want Brexit done. But he has a proper majority and 5 years in government to truly transform this country how he sees fit. And that is a different form of government than we have had in the past decade. So this is a really big moment for the country and how we're going to be governed.
OK, let's talk to Labour's Rebecca Long-Bailey, joining us now from Salford. And Rebecca Long-Bailey, there's no good way of putting this, is there, really, from you? It looks like it was a disastrous campaign with a disastrous result for you.
Well, it's been a devastating night so far. We've had great results here in Salford, but across the country we've lost fantastic colleagues. I think there's going to have to be a very detailed analysis of what's happened. It's been a very difficult campaign for everybody. Certainly my experience in the north and across some of the marginal seats that I visited was that Brexit was a big issue for voters, and it was very difficult to try and reinforce our message of one that tries to bring together both sides of the Leave and Remain divide. And certainly it didn't play out very well tonight.
Yeah, well, you say you were hearing that from the voters. You were hearing it from so many people saying it's really difficult. You were hearing it from candidates. I don't know if you had difficulty explaining it on the doorstep. People just didn't really get it, did they?
No, and I think the problem was that the message, you know, was lost in translation somewhere. It was quite a simple message that we were going to make sure that we got a credible deal that we would put to a final vote. But ultimately, many of our Leave voters felt that we were an extreme Remain party, and many of our Remain voters felt we were an extreme Brexiteer party. And never the twain would meet, and our position actually was to try and build consensus between those who voted Leave and Remain. But as I say, you know, there will be a very detailed analysis now of what happened and why we couldn't get our message reinforced on the doorstep. But sadly, as a result of that, and I'm sure other factors, we've lost some very good colleagues tonight.
I'm going to ask you about the other factors. Just want to share, I'm sure you'd be delighted, Rebecca Long-Bailey. Donald Trump, the US president, has tweeted, imagine that, saying it looks like a big win for Boris in the UK. Look, you've just seen there, Birmingham, Northfield, another one has gone. They just keep dropping. It's got to be something to do with the leader as well, hasn't it?
Well, there'll certainly be an analysis. I haven't spoken to anybody this evening apart from colleagues in Salford yet, and there'll be an analysis of whether Brexit played an important factor, which elements of our manifesto went down well on the doorstep, and broadly many of the proposals that we'd put forward were received quite positively. But ultimately the messaging of the campaign and how that campaign was delivered, I think, is a key factor, because it's all about the ground war at the end of the day, and whichever party fights that ground war well wins the election. The Conservative Party had a simple message but no policies, and it looks like they're doing very well tonight.
Well, they did indeed. Well, there is going to be a vacancy. We heard that from Jeremy Corbyn himself. He says he's not going to fight the next election. Would you like to fight it as leader for Labour?
Well, I think we'll be having discussions within the party. It's certainly not something that I've been thinking about, and we'll have to convene, look at the election, why we lost the election, and determine a process going forward. OK, Rebecca Long-Bailey, thank you very much indeed for your time. Ed Conway's up here now to talk us through some of these remarkable results, where the battles are being won and lost. Well, I say battles, it more or less looks like the smoke is clearing the battlefield. It's lost for Labour.
Well, OK, so let's start with, can I ask a quiz question to the panel of wise people? Which do you think is the most Brexity constituency in the UK? The constituency that voted most for Brexit?
Can I offer a view? I may be completely wrong, but my hunch would be Boston and Skegness.
Former Speaker has it completely correct. 76% Boston and Skegness.
Well,
I was not consulted on that.
How am I doing if I said Great Yarmouth?
Is up there.
I'm up there, aren't I?
And Great Grimsby as well. So 71% leave Great Grimsby, of course, gone to the Tories. And let's have a look at that, because there's an interesting story there if we look at the numbers there. We've shown you this before. I mean, it's a really striking board. This was supposed to be the seats that Labour was defending. All of these, at the start of the night, were red. All of these seats. And it would have taken up to a 4% swing for other parties to win these seats. Just look at all of the different colours there. You've got many Tories, you've got the SNP there, up to 6% here, up to 8%, up to 10%. They've gone beyond a 10% swing. These are enormous gains. You know, the idea that the Tories would be competing here would have seemed extraordinary at the start of the night. But anyway, Great Grimsby, where are we? Over here, Great Grimsby. OK, so Great Grimsby, Humber Estuary. Let's just have a look at this constituency and what's going on beneath the surface when it comes to Great Grimsby, because, you know, there's an interesting story here. Again, similar story in terms of the change in the share of what we've seen elsewhere. So Labour down about 16.7, Tories up by 13%. But look over here. I mentioned the Brexit Leave vote. So 71% Leave vote in Grimsby. Under 45, you know, actually quite a high proportion of under 45, a bit below the national average. But consider that Brexit Leave vote, OK? Come back over here. Constituencies here, Great Grimsby, OK? What we're going to do is we're going to take all of these constituencies and plot them on a chart, just showing you the Brexit vote in different declared seats. So we'll just take this one, look at these. They're going to go across all of these seats, and Great Grimsby is over here. Now, these are the areas that voted the most to leave the EU in that referendum 3 years ago, sorry. And then these are the areas that voted most strongly for Remain. So we've plotted them. This is every single constituency that's declared so far tonight, or this morning. And just look at how much blue there is around here. Now, this is the key battleground that the Conservatives have done so well in so far over this election. They've been winning seats off Labour around here. And actually, if we kind of take a step back and look at this, you know, here we have it. Here we have one of the new battlegrounds for this election campaign. The Tories really fighting very well here. And then Labour, the SNP. Look at how much yellow there is for the SNP in these areas that voted to Remain. These are the Remain areas. Remain over here, Leave over here. And just look at that big glut of constituencies right there. You know, we've yet to see the end of all of these constituencies being declared. More are coming in every moment, but already you can see the geography is changing. And that old geography that we're used to, I'm going to do the same thing again. The old geography, which was all about class and deprivation, we take all those, put those across in terms of deprivation. You know, it was Labour dominating this area, and now look at how many Conservative seats, these are the most deprived seats in the UK. Look at how many Conservative seats there are there in these areas, many of them in the northeast. You've got a lot of SNP there as well, so winning seats off Labour there. And then the Tories still doing well here. But interesting, look, Labour, Lib Dems, you know, fighting in this area, which is the better off parts of the UK. This is, you know, the highest level in terms of, you know, our deprivation index, the best off places in the UK when it comes to kind of qualifications, when it comes to housing quality. Final question, actually. I'm going to go back to the table now. So final question here. There are 3 seats here, 3 Conservative seats. I can see Dermot.
We've got John Bercow. Why are you asking us?
Three Conservative seats. There's Henley, there's one of the Hampshires. There's one other seat, which is among the least deprived in the UK, hasn't yet declared. Any guesses?
As to which this seat might be?
As to what the seat might be?
Well, I mean, it could be one of several, but New Forest West would be an example of a...
It's Buckingham.
Buckingham itself?
It's Buckingham itself.
Well, it would have been very, very selfish
Buckingham,
for me to name my own constituency.
Do you know anything about that?
I know a little bit about Buckingham. It is not a deprived constituency, although, like lots of places, it has pockets of disadvantage. And I remember the former MP, Tim Collins, used to joke that the last time an unemployed person was found in the Buckingham constituency, the individual concerned was expelled. And I said, Tim, that is very unfair. I know you're having a laugh in a light-hearted sort of way, but actually there are disadvantaged people in Buckingham as well. But overall, of course, it is a picture of affluence.
And there we have it. And then it's just interesting that Labour and the Lib Dems competing so strongly at that top end, you know, including Buckingham, but maybe not this time around.
Right. Join the pub quiz there, but without any booze. Let's catch up on the developments, fast-moving, as indeed is the Prime Minister's motorcade there, going back in the dark into central London. Not entirely sure whether he's going to Downing Street or Conservative Party headquarters, and we're hearing there is a protest of some form outside there, so we'll keep an eye on that if he does arrive there. Other developments in terms of seats, we haven't concentrated too much on Northern Ireland, apart from the fact that the Westminster leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Nigel Dodds, lost his seat in North Belfast. A result just in the SDLP, Social Democratic and Labour Party. Their leader, Colm Eastwood, gained foil from Sinn Féin, one of the most marginal seat in Northern Ireland, 17,000 majority there. And he's raising the prospect, so many different stories developing, the prospect in Northern Ireland of more nationalists than unionists being returned as MPs for the very first time. We've got now keeping an eye on the Prime Minister's motorcade, seeing where that ends up and what's awaiting him at the end of it. We've got the co-leader, though, of the Green Party, candidate for the Mayor of London, Sean Berry, I think, joins me now from Westminster. The Green Party's performance, Sean Berry, you're treading water at best, aren't you?
No, our vote share's up around the country. It looks like we're set to about double our overall vote share versus 2017, and that reflects the positive campaign we put forwards, the ideas around investing in the country, remaining in the EU, the positive case we made consistently for remaining in the EU. But we're making gains in terms of vote share in Leave and Remain voting areas, and I think that shows overall the positive campaign that we ran and the hard work of many of our people.
OK, positive but costly. So far, you've lost your deposit in 326 seats.
So far, we've retained our deposit in twice as many seats as we did in 2017 already, just on the seats declared.
OK, Sean Berry, we'll come back to you. We're going to Kensington now, I believe. We're showing... Sean Berry, we're showing Caroline... We're showing you Caroline Lucas.
Let's see if she won.
I, Jeff Raw, Returning Officer, give notice that the number of votes for each candidate at the election of the Member of Parliament in the Brighton Pavilion constituency are as follows. Dobbs Bob, Independent, 212. Furness Nigel, UK Independence Party, 177. Hogan Emma Louise, Conservative Party candidate, 10,176. Imanpour Adam, Labour Party, 13,211. Lucas Caroline, Green Party, 33,151.
Well, Caroline Lucas back there, Remain Alliance seat, no Lib Dem. Let's go to Kensington. There is a Lib Dem, Sam Jima. There's a Labour MP there, Emmett Dent Code. We are expecting this declaration. There it is. Let's listen. Some cheering. Well, a bit of a protest going on there. Let's talk a bit more then until we get the returning officer speaking there. One of those big gains from 2017 for the Labour Party, Emmett Dent Code. But, of course, this high-profile Lib Dem put in there. Sam Jima, former Conservative, left the Conservative Party, across the floor to the Liberal Democrats. And again, hoping on some evidence of tactical voting. Let's see if they've split the vote and given it back to the Conservatives.
Electorate 64,609. Ballot papers issued 43,855. The turnout 67.88%. And I do hereby declare that Felicity Christiane Barnett is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for Kensington constituency.
What's this? OK, well, there, as we were discussing there, the Conservatives haven't got the numbers for you, have gained Kensington back from Labour. Emmett Dent Code gone. We need to see those numbers to see the effect that the Liberal Democrats had, Sam Jima, on that Remain vote, Remain-leaning seat, a majority of just 150. There's the winning candidate.
Second election in a row that you have had to do a recount, so thank you. I would also like to thank my amazing team, my agent Greg Hammond, our chairman Andrew Foster, and every single individual who has worked so hard in Kensington. But most importantly, I would like to thank the people of Kensington who have put their faith and trust in me. I want to be the MP for the whole of Kensington, whether that be the north, the south, or the middle. I want to bring together our communities. And I have a vision that Kensington should be the best place in London to live, to work and to learn.
OK, there's Felicity Buchan back in Kensington for the Conservatives. A narrow squeak, but it seems that the Lib Dems and the Labour Party split the vote there and the Conservatives getting back in there. Just want to say they're seeing Crewe and Nantwich has gone. This was one of the ones we thought we would go, even if it wasn't such a good night for Boris Johnson. Crewe and Nantwich has gone.
It's a swing seat.
Indeed, swing seat. Again for the Conservative Party. But let's have a think there about Kensington, John Bercow. And it seems there, if they wanted to put a Remain alliance together, they didn't get their act together. And we've seen it in several other seats where they had some high hopes, those that wanted at least another referendum. And there's another Conservative getting back in.
Yes, I mean, it simply hasn't worked. And the attempt was made, but it's backfired or, at any rate, not succeeded. And as you say, a Conservative Member of Parliament has been elected for that constituency. I'm not quite sure, because we've not been given the figures.
We need to look exactly at the figures.
Who came second and who came third.
But it's also this idea of tactical voting. You read so much about it online. They were saying this time it's the dog that doesn't bark.
It is the dog that doesn't bark. And the other thing is the power of the party system as well. Because if you think about the way in which the tensions within Parliament split people from their traditional parties in the last Parliament. And you had so many of the defectors and the disillusioned go into other parties or stand as independents, and none of them have come through the other side. Anna Soubry gone, Chuka Umunna gone, Philip Lee, a Conservative, gone, Antoinette Sambach, a Conservative, gone, Dominic Grieve gone in Beaconsfield, and now Sam Gyimah, who was a Conservative.
Who's left? I mean, I suppose Luciana. Who's left?
Luciana, and I
Berger.
think Luciana might get that seat, so that is one to watch.
And
if she does, she really could be in pole position to try and lead the Liberal Democrats.
What were the figures? Do we know what the figures were in Kensington?
But I mean, that will be a classic case of a split, the Remain vote splitting between Labour
and there's
the Liberal
there's
Democrats.
the tail of the tape so far, and we'll just concentrate very quickly on who's gained and lost. And the Conservatives have put on 37 seats so far, and Labour have lost nearly 50. Listen, we were talking about the Greens. I was talking to Sian Berry, who's kindly stayed on the line to reflect on, and I was saying, well, treading water was my phrase. And Caroline Lucas, we then interrupted you to go to that and some other counts. She got back in Brighton Pavilion
with an increased vote,
with an increased majority. So we'll give you that, but it doesn't look like you're going to win any other seats.
No, our target was Bristol West. We doubled our vote there. We came in a very strong second, but the Labour Party continued to hold that seat. We're in a very strong position there to carry on gaining councillors, and we've got an election for mayor in that city next year where we've got an excellent candidate. So that's a very good springboard for that. But overall across the country, we've seen strong support for many of our candidates, some big swings to us. We've increased our vote by several times in some of the Unite to Remain seats. My colleague Jonathan Bartley has got a very strong second place in Dulwich and West Norwood. These are all places where we have councillors, and we're going to continue building up Green representatives who, when you get elected as a Green, you work hard and you get an increased vote, as we've seen from Caroline Lucas just now.
Something truly historic.
We're just going to have a listen to her.
I'm totally going to listen.
Yeah, let's have a listen. In the darkness. And very finally, let me thank my amazing husband, Richard, my children, Theo and Isaac, for all of their love and support all the way along. Thank you.
OK, well, she's finished then, and delighted and delightful. You. Last question. I mean, you mentioned this, we're calling it the Remain Alliance. It was pretty feeble, wasn't it, compared to the Conservative Party and the Brexit Party? It was you in England with some of the Lib Dems, and in Wales with Plaid Cymru. I mean, you really had to get some kind of accommodation with the Labour Party if you wanted to make any inroads at all.
I think this election should be a wake-up call for the Labour Party that they do need to work with other parties in order to overcome the problems we have with the electoral system. It's pretty clear now that the two-party system is not serving this country. First past the post is not delivering votes that reflect the people's wishes, and we need to sort this out, and we should be getting together and working towards some kind of electoral reform in the next Parliament. But Caroline Lucas will be there in Parliament. She'll be putting forward our good ideas, making sure that there's a strong Green voice there, and being fantastic as she always is.
Yeah, I mean, I've just got to say that, haven't I? So Boris Johnson wins this large majority through the first past the post system and is therefore going to reform the voting system.
Yeah, I can't pretend that Boris Johnson being Prime Minister is going to be good for the country. We need to see the country renewed. He's not going to deliver that. Now he has to deliver on his election slogan, which he absolutely refused to come on and give details of and take scrutiny of. Get Brexit done. I don't think in a year's time we're still going to be mired in a Brexit mess. And I think he's got a very difficult job ahead of him.
Sian Berry, thank you very much indeed. Very quickly, John Burke.
Dermot, as you rightly say, in these circumstances, there's no way on earth the Conservative government is going to consider reforming the electoral system from which it very handsomely benefits. That isn't on the agenda. It doesn't mean that Sian isn't entitled to make the argument that she's made against it, but that is the reality. Just on a positive point, I would say that although it's incredibly difficult for one person on his or her own to make a great impact, Caroline Lucas, and I can say this from the vantage point of the chair over 10 years, has been an absolutely outstanding and indefatigable Member of Parliament. She's her own leader, she's her own chief whip, and she's ubiquitous. She's there all the time, she speaks in debate after debate after debate. She uses the procedures of the House to proselytise for her cause, and she really is a model MP.
OK, John, thank you very much indeed for that. Stoke Central has gone. It's a gain for the Conservatives. Gareth Snell not returning for the Labour Party. The assault continues. Interesting developments. We touched on them a little earlier in Northern Ireland. The headline being that the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party in Westminster, Nigel Dodds, lost his seat. Many other developments, and there's our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, to tell us about them. David.
Yes, Dermot, if getting Brexit done has worked for Boris Johnson, it certainly hasn't worked for the DUP. They knew they were in trouble in Belfast South, but the big story here is Belfast North, where their Westminster leader, Nigel Dodds, the man who is Arlene Foster's deputy leader of the party, has lost his seat to Sinn Féin's John Finucane with a majority of around 2,000 votes. John Finucane is the current Lord Mayor of Belfast. He's the son of the Belfast solicitor Pat Finucane, murdered by Loyalist paramilitaries back in the 1980s. It is a very significant moment, and let me briefly try and explain why. In losing 2 seats, the DUP are down to 8. We're still waiting to hear from Fermanagh South Tyrone, but it looks like on balance Sinn Féin has held on to all 7 of its seats. But when you add on the fact that the SDLP have gained 2, there are now 9 nationalist MPs and 8 unionist MPs. Nationalist MPs will outnumber unionist MPs in Northern Ireland for the very first time in the history of this place, and that certainly will increase the volume of calls for a border poll. So Brexit has not only moved us towards another referendum in Scotland, but has moved us into referendum territory here in Northern Ireland too.
So Brexit may be done, but the UK may be undone. David, thank you very much indeed. David Blevins there in Belfast. It's 4:30. You're watching the Brexit election on Sky News. The headlines so far, and our Sky News forecast is predicting that the Conservatives will win the 2019 general election by a majority of something between 76 and 88 seats. Boris Johnson held on to his seat comfortably, with the Conservatives making big gains overall. Jeremy Corbyn has retained his seat but has announced he will not lead Labour into the next election.
I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward. And I will lead the party during that period to ensure that discussion takes place and we move on into the future.
And Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP are celebrating. This was Nicola Sturgeon after hearing, as she was hearing, that the Lib Dem leader Jo Swinson lost her seat to the Scottish National Party.
For millions of people in our country, these results will bring dread and dismay, and people are looking for hope.
OK, you're watching the Brexit election. Let's have a look at this winning line. The formal winning line is 326 seats. The Conservatives are closing in on that. Here's Ed Conway to talk us through developments.
Yeah, that's right, Dermot. We are getting pretty close to that moment where there may well be a new government. 326 seats, all important, as you say. Where do these current results put the Conservatives and the Labour Party? Let's have a look. They are getting close, the Tories, 284 seats. And you can see that line just there. That line, they are aiming for 326. Remember, the Sky forecast has predicted the Conservatives to get between 363 and 369 seats, a majority of up to 86 seats. So we are getting closer and closer. You can see that there. Now let's just consider some of the big names who have been lost from the House of Commons, lost potentially from politics tonight. Let's consider, first of all, Jo Swinson, Lib Dem leader Jo Swinson in East Dunbartonshire, DUP deputy leader Nigel Dodds and Laura Pidcock. Some people, you see on the far right, some people thought that she might well be a future potential Labour leader. And consider as well Caroline Flint. Let's have a look at the next group of people, including Caroline Flint, she'll be seen as another high-profile Labour loss. Dominic Grieve as well. He ran as an independent in Beaconsfield. It was always going to be tough for him. Former Conservative. As well as them, Anna Soubry as well went to another former Tory loss tonight. And former Labour MP, Chuka Umunna, he defected to the Lib Dems, of course, famously. He will not be an MP in the new Parliament. That's now official. And from early on, really, this was shaping up to be a tough night for Labour. It's worth looking at another seat, Workington, because now we can see it. So you can see at Workington, a Leave seat, constituency has been pretty much Labour-led since 1918, since its creation, but now it is Tory blue. Labour's lost a few of its shadow cabinet as well, including Shadow Environment Secretary Susan Hayman and Leslie Laird in Scotland, on top of Laura Pidcock, who we mentioned a little bit earlier. But better news for the party in Hartlepool. The exit poll, remember, suggesting that the Tories would take that seat in Hartlepool. Let's have a look at that. But in the event, it was held by Labour MP Mike Hill, and Richard Tice coming in there in a close third, but nonetheless in third place. And the Sky forecast has now narrowed the Conservative majority. And here you can see it. It's narrowed the Conservative majority from that exit poll. It is now, the Sky forecast, at 363 to 369, Dermot.
Incredible. OK, Ed, thank you very much indeed. Well, Ed touched on it there, this issue of the Remain alliance, what there was of it, the Lib Dems and the Greens in a lot of seats in England, Plaid Cymru uniting. They hoped to have some kind of effect. Well, they don't seem to be making any impact. I want to ask Sam Coates, who's been drilling down into those numbers. They haven't had any effect in terms of benefiting themselves, Sam, but have they been doing some damage, perhaps, as well to Labour?
So, thank you, Dermot. Yes, you've got to remember that we're only having this election because the Liberal Democrats teamed up with the SNP to hand what Boris Johnson wanted and have this December election. Yet, so far, at this point in the night, they have made 0 net gains overall and lost a leader, while also putting on a couple of seats elsewhere. But look at the effect in seats like Kensington. There, Sam Gyimah was the Liberal Democrat candidate. Huge Liberal Democrat resources in that seat, yet it went Conservative. There were just 150 votes in it between the Conservatives and Labour, yet Sam Gyimah got 9,000 plus votes in that seat, suggesting that if he hadn't been standing, perhaps that actually would have stayed with another party that supports a second referendum. You can see the same pattern in City of London with Chuka Umunna and Watford. Really, number of seats where if the Liberal Democrats hadn't been standing, the result could be different and a second referendum party might have got into power.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. I want to join Labour's Hilary Benn. He's at his count in Leeds Central. And Hilary Benn, just hearing, just as we come to Dudley North, another gain for the... Sorry, Derby North. Dudley's already gone. Derby North there. Another gain against your party, again for the Conservatives. It just does get worse and worse. It's like some kind of slow-motion political car crash from your point of view, isn't it?
Well, it's a very, very bad night for the Labour Party. It looks as if we're heading for the lowest number of Labour MPs since 1935. That's more than 80 years ago. And what can one say? We have failed to win the people's trust and confidence. We won't have the opportunity to put our policies into effect, and we need to reflect on what happened but before we elect new leadership to take us into the battles that lie ahead.
And Hilary Benn, we're just looking at some of these lists. All the Stoke seats have now gone Conservatives. You held 2 of them before this general election. Newcastle-under-Lyme hasn't been Conservative, has been Labour since 1919. We've been talking about the Second World War. That's just after the First World War. Look, we know you're no fan of Jeremy Corbyn. There was a point, of course, when you tried to get rid of him. He's got to go pretty soon, hasn't he?
Well, Jeremy, I think in a very dignified speech, said he won't lead the Labour Party into the next election. The precise timing of his departure is a matter for him. I think it's important that we reflect on what went wrong, how we're going to respond to this terrible result that we have had, because I think that then informs decisions about who should take positions of new leadership for the party. But we will need to get on with it. But in the meantime, we have a job as the opposition to hold Boris Johnson and the government to account, because I think the Prime Minister is going to find things pretty difficult.
Well, I'll remove the comma. I mean, you will have a job holding them to account with fewer, it seems, than 200 MPs. Would you tell me what you think went wrong? You were at the heart of the campaign.
I think very simply, for many voters, Brexit was the one and only thing that mattered, and they voted accordingly. Secondly, any Labour candidate or canvasser will tell you we knocked on too many doors where people said, I've always voted Labour in my life, but I'm not going to vote Labour on this occasion, and they didn't have confidence in the leadership of the party. And thirdly, there were some voters who said, we're not entirely sure that you can do all of the things that you have promised. Nye Bevan famously said once that socialism is the language of priorities. At the same time, there were a lot of voters who were enthused by what we had to offer, particularly younger voters. So it's not about throwing all of that away. You have to have credible leadership to win people's trust and confidence, because that's how you are able to form a government, and then you can get on and try and create a fairer and a more equal society. Because I tell you one thing, Dermot, what isn't going to go away is the fundamental unfairness in the fifth richest country in the world of over 1 million people last year going up to a complete stranger to saying, I can't feed my family and I cannot feed myself, will you help me? Now, society either says, well, that's the price you pay for having this kind of economy, and that seems to be the Conservative approach, or you say, it doesn't have to be like that, we can change it for the better. And that thirst, that desire for a fairer country is not going to go away despite the depth of the defeat that we have suffered tonight.
All right, thanks very much indeed,
Thank
Hilary
you.
Benn there in Leeds. Let's just check in on the Prime Minister's movements. We got some shots of him. You saw his motorcade arriving into central London a bit earlier. We're told that he did go to Conservative Party headquarters, no doubt to congratulate the campaign staff there and their well-crafted and successful campaign. And there's a festive Downing Street, which we are expecting the Prime Minister to arrive back at fairly shortly, no doubt in a very festive mood. He referred in his acceptance speech when he was elected for the seat of Uxbridge how jolly it was to have a Christmas election. Well, it certainly worked out for him. Let's get the thoughts of my panel here. John Burke, I want to go back to what I was discussing there with Hilary Benn. And, you know, we've been doing all these parallels with history. I referred to 1919 for Newcastle Under-Lyme. This is the worst performance since 1935. But isn't the comparison, the more recent comparison, in terms of the Labour Party's future here, something like 1992? So you go through these 4 election defeats in a row, and the Labour Party realises that it has to change and change fundamentally. 2 years later, Tony Blair came along, and then 3 years after that, won a landslide. Are there any signs that Labour will address it that way, or will they just think we need more Corbyn, or a different Corbyn, or a better Corbyn?
I think it's a big challenge to the Labour Party, and I rather agree off the top of my head that there is some sort of parallel with 1992. To lose again so soon after the last victory for the Conservatives is obviously very, very demoralising for the Labour Party, particularly when they did better last time. They're not winning. They did better last time than had been expected, and this time they've done very considerably worse than was expected. So some very, very serious soul-searching needs to be done. I don't think it's just about a personality. I think it is about a programme, it's about a mindset, it's about a philosophy. The Labour Party can't just have, well, it can have, but I think it would be frittering away its time foolishly if it were just to have a debate about personalities. It's got to be about the overall approach. In fact, seeing Hilary up on screen causes me to call to mind his late and great father, that wonderful parliamentarian Tony Benn, who always used to say, as probably Dermot you'll recall, in those debates in the 80s, whenever he was challenged about some other figure in the party, put away your prepared BBC script, Mr Dimbleby. It's not about personalities, it's about the issues, it's about the policies, it's about the priorities of conference, and so on and so forth. And I think now the Labour Party has got to have a debate about what sort of party it is, what its priorities are and what its philosophy is to be.
Let's bring in Beth on the other side of this, because even in victory, you've been touching on it during the evening as this story, this remarkable performance, it seems, by the Conservative Party has developed. The Conservative Party now has to have a bit of a rethink, given where it's now got an awful lot of its MPs in places where it never did before.
That's absolutely true, but I think what was so interesting about Boris Johnson's manifesto was how slim it was, how many pictures were in it and how little text was in it. What he effectively did was call an election and win an election convincingly on a single message of get Brexit done. And then when you look into the manifesto, the tax and spend was pretty modest. There wasn't that much commitment. The social care policy was part. Why was he doing that? Well, I think he was doing it so he had latitude. Yeah. So once he came into number 10, he could begin pulling the levers depending on the majority he's got. But I do think that if he has won a big group of traditionally Labour seats in blue-collar workers, he's got a different voter base that maybe want different things from a government. And if they've lent him their vote in this election to get Brexit done, he somehow has to reinvent the party to give them a reason to vote for them another time.
We'll continue this conversation. I want to bring in Ed Conway, though, because he's got some of these historical comparisons for us. You've got a big red chart there. What does it tell us, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, a chart that I don't think any Labour supporter would much enjoy seeing. You know, this is a comparison of different Labour majorities over the years, and we've taken the exit poll here, so for 391. We're currently forecasting a little bit more than that, but still to be below 200. So below 200 is the projection, maybe getting up to kind of 199 seats. You can see on the bottom of the screen, they're kind of getting closer to that, but the number of seats that we have yet to declare are dwindling. But let's just compare that with previous eras of the Labour government. So obviously Jeremy Corbyn's result last time around 262, considerably higher. You've got the Ed Miliband years, Gordon Brown there, that was seen as a poor result at the time. Clearly it was, he didn't remain Prime Minister. And then the Blair years, just look at those Blair years. In historical comparison, you can see there's no other period in terms of the length of time that Labour have actually managed to get those majorities that compares with it. Michael Foot in 1983, so the longest suicide note in history, still over 200, 209 seats. In other words, higher than the projection for Jeremy Corbyn this time around, and that is historically tends to be seen as the worst ever Labour performance in recent history. And then go back through the kind of years of Wilson through to Clement Attlee here, obviously the famous 1945 result there. But there is really no other period, OK, comparing what you've got in this time projected for this election, there is no other period like this that has a result like this, as low as this, since all the way back in the 1930s. So, you know, that's the other big story of the night. After the Conservative likely victory is what happens to the Labour Party now that they are back at the same kind of levels they saw in 1935. I mean, it will be a staggering thing for Labour to have to absorb, and who knows quite how they absorb it and where they go from here. But, I mean, it's a very stark chart, isn't it, Dermot?
Ed, thank you very much indeed. Eye-popping, really. I wonder who it is for John Trickett, Labour's John Trickett, who joins me now. I don't know, well, obviously you can't see what Ed Conway was describing, but you know this is one of the worst Labour performances ever since dinosaurs roamed the earth. Well, political dinosaurs anyway. What are you feeling about it?
Well, I hope you're not suggesting I'm a dinosaur, but look, it's devastating for the Labour Party. I think it's damaging for the country because the things which the government have promised, I don't believe can be delivered in the way that they said they have. You do need an effective opposition, and it's going to take us some time to think through the defeat and how we begin to rebuild an effective opposition and alternative government in due course. Look, I think there were people inside the Labour Party who gave some of them senior, who gave the impression that Labour was simply a Remain party. But how could we really have done that when these people had spoken, especially across the north of England, where I am, here in West Yorkshire? People were clear they wanted out of the European Union. but there were significant players in the Labour Party who were giving a different impression. That was a big mistake, and it left the impression that we'd left behind the very people who'd supported us for over 100 years.
And I know I can hear them clearing up behind you. I mean, you got back, but you had a much reduced majority, didn't you? Even though you were sending out that message that we hear you. Well, you're saying it was then clouded by the overall message.
Well, look, I think the first thing is, and this was about Brexit, I've no doubt about that at all, but it symbolised for many people the thought that perhaps Labour had lost touch with the people who'd stood by us for all those decades. And look, I was warning in private and in shadow cabinet week after week after week that to do that, to go down that track, was dangerous for us because the majority of Labour seats are in the north of England, and the vast majority of them voted to leave. Now, politics is partly about mathematics as well as hearts and minds and big ideas. And you cannot win an election if you cannot persuade a sufficient number of people to vote for you. But they felt as though we'd walked away from them. That was a mistake. I pointed out clearly, and we've now paid a very serious price. Probably there were other mistakes as well, but I think that was the key issue.
Yeah, I mean, was one of the other big mistakes this fact of credibility. Individually, a lot of people, when polled, did like a lot of offerings from the Labour Party, but the word lot is important here. There were lots and lots and lots, some that popped up after the manifesto, and it added up to billions upon billions of spending, and in the end, people just didn't believe any of it.
Yeah, look, our policies taken one by one were extremely popular. I think everybody could see that. They went down very, very well. But were they coherent? Did we offer a way to fund all of the promises which we were making in a way which was plausible? And that political economy, I think, was a problem for us. I go back to Brexit, but I have no doubt at all that we need to have a review about exactly how we did this tax and spend stuff.
John Trickett.
Rightly to try to put the problems wrong.
Sorry to cut you off, John Trickett. We're going to Devon East. There's an independent standing here, Claire Wright, who's in with a good chance. Let's listen.
The Green Party, 711. Simon J, the Conservative Party candidate, 32,577. Rylance Eleanor AC, Liberal Democrats, to stop Brexit, 1,771. Wilson Daniel, commonly known as Dan Wilson, the Labour Party candidate, 2,870. Wright Claire L, Independent, 25,869. There were 150
well, there we are.
rejected
Claire
ballots.
Wright, the Independent, has run the Tories close twice there in the past, but the Conservatives actually putting on some votes. And just seeing at the bottom of your screen, needing 14 seats to formally win this general election. John Bercow, you know something about, well, you know about all these constituencies. But as I say, Claire Wright, for an Independent, is run it close twice.
She's got
before.
a strong
This is
track
the third
record
time.
locally. She's very well regarded, and so she got a dramatically bigger vote than ordinarily an Independent would get. But she's been there before, and she's done well, but not well enough. And it is traditionally a very strong Conservative seat.
We have pictures of Boris Johnson, the triumphant Prime Minister, arriving back in Downing Street carrying a red box. I think not too triumphant in the wee small hours of the morning. No doubt going to get a few hours sleep after this long winter campaign, which has resulted in them, I'm going to say it, winning this general election. Formally, they haven't won it yet. As you can see on your screen there, they are exactly 13 seats away from doing that, but plenty more still to count. We're just hearing... Oh, by the way, you may, if you've been with us all night, just hearing that Christine Jardine from the Lib Dems has held on there in Edinburgh. A strong Scottish National Party performance there. Beth, I wanted you to come in, off the back of Claire Wright not doing that. And this is a bit of a theme there. You've already been describing it, of these independents, these people that left to join other parties, sometimes fighting their old seats, sometimes going to other ones. they just don't seem to have made it.
No, there was a couple of things at the beginning of the election that we thought would be big themes. One was the sort of four-party race, the sort of surge of the Liberal Democrats and the Brexit Party didn't happen. I mean, we're in two-party territory again, and of course the SNP utterly dominant in Scotland, but in England and Wales, two-party politics. And then the other big theme was the defectors. How disruptive would they be in a campaign? But they failed to make their mark, really. But I think that that's a reflection of how strong party politics are on the ground when you're just grinding out an election campaign. But it does mean that there will be more discipline again in the Commons. There won't be all these independents or defectors.
It's a very good point. I mean, to put to John Bercow, given what you presided over
in particular, in particular
for the last year.
There isn't...
Well, I think that's a pity. Personally, I think it's a very good thing for politics when there are some free-spirited, highly principled, personally very assertive individuals who say, no, whatever the party says, this is what I believe, this is what I stand for, this is what...
But we saw the whipping system kind of break down, and you were pleased about that then, where you helped it wherever it could.
Yes, I mean, I think that is, as I say, a good thing. I think if you ask the public, they always say, what we want is politicians who stand up for what they believe. We don't just want people who operate as nodding donkeys. We don't want people who simply take instructions and vote entirely as they're told to vote. We want people with a bit of independence, a bit of get up and go, a bit of willingness sometimes to be different. So, you know, you cannot have a parliament exclusively made up of people like that. In a modern parliamentary democracy, you have to have parties and you have to have some discipline. But all I'm saying is 3 cheers for those who had a bit of tenacity and spirit and who, let's
and what was going on? I just want to ask you,
their own careers on the line.
We're close to formally seeing the Conservatives get across this 3-2-6. But what was going through your mind then when you've heard these arguments about, you know, we want sovereignty for the great British Parliament, and then some people who espouse that very strongly then say, well, we can't have this. Parliamentarians blocking government policy. Was your view on it? Well, that's what they're there for.
Well, I don't say that's the only purpose of a Member of Parliament, by any means, but it is part of the purpose of a Member of Parliament to stand up for personal causes and for principle. And it did seem to me, frankly, contrary and inconsistent when people who had championed the cause of Brexit for years under the banner of take back control, then seem to inveigh against the idea that Parliament should have control. I suppose it really comes down to this question of who governs. And the government took the view that only the government should initiate legislation and policy. My own view from the chair was that as it was a minority government, as it didn't have a majority in the House, it must be open to other actors on the stage who weren't part of the government to put forward their own proposals. And I make absolutely no apology for that. And far from thinking that the last Parliament was a bad Parliament, a retrograde Parliament, a Parliament to be denounced, I think it was a good Parliament, and I celebrate it.
When I went round the country, though, the fact was that the public were really angry with Parliament. They were actually really angry because they felt.
But there's another irony here, isn't it? I mean, who blocked Theresa May's withdrawal agreement?
Well, Boris Johnson
amongst others.
Boris
weaponised.
Boris must be speaking autobiographically when he talks about parliamentarians blocking Brexit. He must be speaking autobiographically because I'm sure he hasn't got any problem with his short-term memory, and he will know that in 2 out of the 3 votes on the May withdrawal deal, he voted against it. He voted to block it. He voted to stop Brexit. Now, apparently it was all right when he voted to stop it, but when anybody else chose to do so, a different set of rules applied. I leave that to explain...
And you can argue that it's not up to Labour to pass a Conservative version of Brexit, which is why, in a way, many Labour MPs didn't want to support May's deal or Boris Johnson's deal, because it wasn't the sort of Brexit
and it's not their obligation.
Wanted, but... whether you like it or not, or whether you think it's fair or not, the way that Boris Johnson and his team framed it as Parliament blocking Brexit was extremely effective on the
Beth, I absolutely acknowledge that. It has been a highly effective, focused campaign on the part of Boris Johnson and his party with real message discipline. You don't normally associate Boris Johnson with the idea of discipline and restraint and sticking to a line, but he has done so. The only point I would make is that although Parliament may be unpopular and it may be subject to excoriation by very large numbers of voters around the country, I am sticking to the view that it was a good Parliament. Geoffrey Cox, for example, the Attorney-General, said, this Parliament is a disgrace. Well, he's entitled to that view, and I'm entitled to the view that it was actually a good Parliament that should be cherished,
Can I ask
celebrated,
you one thing
and
about
complimented.
Just keeping an eye on the countdown. 4
Can I
seats
ask
to
you
the
one
3-2
thing?
seats.
Please.
How worried were you about a no-deal Brexit, and did you want to stop it?
I was worried about a no-deal Brexit, but very particularly, my answer is this, Beth. If the House of Commons wanted to authorise a no-deal Brexit, that was entirely within its gift and perfectly proper. What seemed to me to be constitutionally and indeed ethically unacceptable was for there to be a no-deal Brexit inadvertently, by accident, because we crashed out and perhaps because of the prorogation of Parliament, Parliament had no opportunity to stop it. My point was not that it was for me to stop a no-deal Brexit,
no,
but
to enable MPs to do that. But were you actively thinking? You were actively thinking of new and innovative ways for those backbenchers to achieve it, to rule out no deal.
I was certainly thinking of, as you put it, new and innovative ways to facilitate members of the House of Commons to discharge their duties. Absolutely. I totally accept that that was part of my thinking, and I make no apology for that. I wasn't trying to will a particular outcome, but to facilitate those in its pursuit.
Well, if you call it facilitating, I mean, others called it plotting.
Ah, plotting. Well, plotting is a rather subjective and loaded term, not the sort of term that I would associate
I might have
with
seen
someone
it,
like you.
Well, I saw it on the front page. I saw it on the front
moderation.
page of some popular newspapers.
Oh, you mean some down-market rag?
You may say that. I can't possibly comment, John.
Do you mean some organ of well-known bigotry? I think you do.
I mean no such thing.
I think it's some Pujadis newspaper scribbling away inanely and constituting tomorrow's fish and chip paper. No, the responsibility of members of Parliament is to do what they believe to be right. The fact that they might be subject to denunciation and, in a sense, journalistic flagellation is really neither here nor there. I always took the view that I should try from the chair to do what I believe to be right. The fact that somebody was sounding off in the background and saying how awful it was and what a disgrace I was and so on and so forth didn't lose me a wink of sleep. I couldn't give a tinker's
Did you even read
cuss.
them? I mean, it was water off a duck's back, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, most of the more bigoted organs I gave up reading some very considerable number of years ago. You're quite right. You're absolutely right. Gosh, you know me too well, Dermot.
Okay.
I took absolutely no notice of the sort of bilious bluster of some of those newspapers. And one of these days, perhaps in my soon-to-be-published book, I will tell you what I really think.
There's a bit of a plug, OK.
I'm trying to overcome my shyness.
Available in all good bookshops. Conservatives need, this is a formal moment approaching, 1 seat to win, to get that formal moment when they get 326 seats and therefore cannot be beaten, irrespective of whatever results come in. There they are on 325. They've been ticking up as we've been talking and listening to a marvellous, well, in the end, monologue from John Bercow that we are waiting for the next seat. Let's build up to that. It's going to come in soon, I'm sure. The Conservatives holding Bournemouth East, 325, and holding Worthing West. That is it.
Wow. Worthing West is the constituency.
Well, that's it. Confirmation of the result. The Conservatives have formally won this general election, taking their 326th seat, meaning they cannot be beaten whatever happens now. I think taking their 327th as well, seeing Dagenham and Rainham, John Cruddas, big beast of the Labour Party there, going Conservatives gaining that. The yes there goes up to 327. The Conservatives and Boris Johnson have won the general election of the winter of 2019. Well, a formal moment, Beth. I mean, you, as we were counting that down there, that intake of breath on John Cruddas falling
John
in Dagenham
Cruddas
and Raynham.
in Dagenham. I had heard that that was quite tight on the ground, but I'd also heard that Labour were hopeful of holding it.
One of very big interest to John Bercow. Buckingham is declaring.
Buckingham.
I've asked the candidates to join me here on the stage, and once I have declared the result, each of them will be invited to say a few words, if they wish, starting with a successfully elected individual. And so to the formal announcement of the results for the election of the Member of Parliament for the Buckingham constituency held on 12th of December 2019. I, Andrew Small, being the Deputy Acting Returning Officer at the aforementioned election, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each of the candidates is as follows. Bell, Andrew Ronald Macmillan, Brexit Party, 1,286. Dorrell, Stephen James, Liberal Democrat candidate, 16,624. Morgan, John David, commonly known as David Morgan, Labour Party candidate, 7,638. Smith, Gregory David, commonly known as Greg Smith, the Conservative Party candidate, 37,035. Thompson, Ned Stevens, Independent, 681. Vitiello, Antonio Daniel, English Democrats.
There we have it, a clear victory, as expected, for Greg Smith, the Conservative candidate in Buckingham, taking over from none other than John Bercow. Your reaction to that, then, John?
Well, many congratulations to Greg Smith. I don't know him well, but I do know him. I've met him several times in the past. He's a very, very dedicated Conservative campaigner. He's long aspired to enter Parliament, and now he's done so with a very handsome victory indeed. It doesn't come as a surprise to me. It is a very, very deeply ingrained Conservative seat. There hasn't been a direct party contest of that kind since 2005 at a general election, by virtue of the fact that I've served as Speaker, but I want to wish Greg Smith every possible success in representing the constituency.
OK, also hearing that Hearts South West, David Gauke, that's gone Conservative. David Gauke was standing there as an independent, ejected, of course, from the Conservative Party. And you were making this point earlier, John Bercow. David Gauke, gone from Parliament, gone. A cabinet-rank minister, of course, not too very long ago in the Conservatives, gone altogether. Is he a loss?
I think he's a loss. He's a very accomplished guy. He's very measured, urbane, intelligent, reasonable. He represents a moderate Tory tradition which the party can't possibly afford to lose. And I think it's a great shame that he's left the House of Commons.
Just hearing from
a lot of other people.
John, just hearing from Bolsover that Dennis Skinner would have been the father of the House, has lost Bolsover, the Conservatives in there. He's the oldest MP to lose the seat at the age of 87, and this is the victor. We'll just have a look at that. I mean, Beth, we were reacting to that because it's Dennis Skinner.
Yes.
Like, on the results already, he's not there due to ill health, we understand, but on the results, it was always going to happen on the results.
It was. That I was not surprised that Dennis Skinner lost Bolsover, but I should just tell you as well that Luciana Berger did not win in Finchley. So that's another...
on the heels of David Gauke.
That's another David Gauke. But, I mean, if we just think about what's going on here in terms of, as I said last night, ahead of the polling day, Boris Johnson consolidated a vote leave base going into this election. He went in with 58% of vote leavers prepared to vote Conservative. He came out the other end with 70%. And as I said last night, if he could turn out that vote and hold that vote and get that vote to back him, that group of vote leave voters, he would get the mandate to deliver Brexit. And he has done that with bells on, hasn't he? And that all these seats are falling. in vote leave areas, it was the strategy perfectly executed in this election.
And is it an opportunity, I mean, beyond getting Brexit done, whatever form that takes, is it an opportunity, John Bercow, for a one nation, a different one nation Conservative Party, though, to reassert itself?
Very much depends on the leader, because in the Conservative Party, an enormous amount hangs upon what is directed from the top. I'm not saying that there are no democratic decision-making procedures at all, but they're nothing like as deep-rooted as they are in a number of other political parties. So really, it's Boris Johnson's call. It's up to him to shape and configure the Conservative Party of the future in his own image.
I've just got to...
the Bolsover was 74th on the Tory list.
I've just got to correct one of the results we gave you. Dagenham and Rainham has been held by... held by the Labour Party. I think we were given the wrong data. I mean, it's amazing. It's John Cruthers. It's amazing.
I was shocked by that.
But it's amazing, given the amount of data we're processing in the course of one evening, that there's just that to correct. But
just coming in on what John was just saying as well, there were some of those anti-no dealers in the Conservative Party, some which got expelled, some which got the whip given back to them, and they believed that Boris Johnson, although he had put himself in full Brexiteer armour, that if he did win a majority, he would pivot to who they believe Boris Johnson really is, which is a one-nation Conservative. And what has been interesting as we go up and down the country is, although there was no mention of one-nation conservatism in his manifesto, he talks about it a lot, and he talked about it, didn't he, in his acceptance speech. So maybe there will be a different form of conservatism.
But John, you were saying...
step forward.
What do you think he knows?
Well,
he
he'll
wants,
have to decide.
who he is politically.
He'll have to decide. I mean, I've always felt that Boris Johnson doesn't carry a very large quantity of baggage. I don't think that he has a very large number of dogmatic convictions. I think he does have a very, very strong and enduring conviction that he, Boris Johnson, should become and remain Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And that's where I draw the parallel with Disraeli. That was very much Disraeli's approach to politics. It was about getting power. And once you've got power, you then decide...
But wasn't that... I mean, let's draw a more recent parallel, and his big rival for many years, of course, the former Prime Minister, David Cameron. It was said that he didn't carry an awful lot of ideological baggage. Hold the thought.
That's also true. The two statements are not mutually exclusive.
Batley and Spen.
Tracy Lynn, Labour and Cooperative Party, 22,594. Mark James, Conservative Party candidate, 19,069. Batley Borough Independence, Heavy Woolen District, 6,432. Lawson John Craig, Liberal Democrats, 2,462.
Well, there we have it. Batley and Spen being held by the Labour Party. You may remember that was the seat of the murdered Labour MP Joe Cox. Tracy Brabin took over in that seat, and holding on there with 22,594, a majority of 3,525. And I wonder if we'll be hearing from Tracy Brabin in a moment or two. And just at the bottom of your screen, the Tories continue to go well past that 326 mark, with the formal point at which they have won the election. 337 so far. Tracy Brabin.
My husband Richard, Councillors Big Gwen, Steve Afak-Shabir and Councillor Akhtar, Mr Sheikh, and of course our tireless, brilliant campaigners and volunteers who've put in so many hours making our victory possible. I'd also like to thank you, the staff here this evening, that have counted through the night, going into 5 o'clock, and I'm sure we'll be here a little bit longer. I'd also like to thank everybody that took time to speak to me on the doorstep, over the phone, at the school gates, out and about over the past 6 weeks, and of course, every single person who voted for me. We covered many discussions: Dewsbury Hospital, our education system, social care, crime, and of course Brexit. Now, we might not have always agreed, but those
Tracy Brabin, they're
conversations
back for Labour in Battling Spen, but as you can see, they're pretty much in tune with what's been happening to Labour. In lots of seats, they've lost, down 12.8% in terms of share, but still held on their reduced majority, 3,525. Also at the bottom of your screen, well, some better news for Labour, but it's bad news not for the Conservatives, for the Liberal Democrats. Labour holding on in Sheffield Hallam, the seat that Labour took. Remember, that was the seat of the former Lib Dem leader, Nick Clegg. Seems to be a story of our times, Lib Dem leaders losing their seats. Joe
He
Swinson.
lost in 2015, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
The wipeout.
Yeah. So,
sorry, who's that?
Nick Clegg,
Nick Clegg.
Gone in Sheffield Hallam. And,
he lost in 2017.
And Labour have held on. Jo Swinson's lost her seat as well. Want to talk, though, OK, so something going the right way for Labour, but it's not enough. They are, as John was pointing out to me, in actual fact, they have hit 200 seats.
They have hit 200 seats.
Thought they might underperform on that size. Gordon about to declare. Now, this very interesting seat was, of course, once the seat of the former leader of the Scottish National Party, Alex Salmond, once so spectacularly by the Conservatives. Let's have a look.
James Clark, Scottish Conservative and Unionist, 23,066. Heather Tony Herbert, Scottish Labour Party, 3,052. James Bradley Oates, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 5,913. Richard Gordon Thompson, Scottish National Party, SNP, 23,885. Therefore, I give public notice that Richard
taking it back
Gordon
then. Well, there's so many narrow margins, particularly in a lot of these Scottish seats, three-way and four-way marginals, many of them. But the SNP have taken it back 819. That said, the Conservatives holding on in Aberdeen, Western Banff and Buchan in Aberdeenshire. But that one, it so stung the Scottish National Party when Alex Salmond was ejected. It was the highest swing in any seat in the UK, away from the SNP to the Conservatives. Well, they've taken it back and, well, rather expected on that exit poll, which is predicting a very good night for Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP. Gordon there gained it back there from the Conservatives. Quick look at their share in the vote. The SNP 42.7%, up 6.9. The Conservatives up a bit as well. Labour vote again so depressed. Not as much as it has been in many seats in England. Beth, I want to stay with the Labour performance because we've got to get this in. So many questions now.
So many questions.
About the leadership.
Absolutely.
Jeremy Corbyn addressed it but said he would go before the next election. Well, that's probably not going to be for another 5 years.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn said he wouldn't fight another election, but he's then talked about a period of reflection. And I think that they will probably go away and lick their wounds and reflect and try and come up with a plan. But now, I think a big theme of the next Parliament will be the civil war now in Labour as to who takes over and which direction the party goes in. And interestingly, when you interviewed Richard Bergen earlier, the Shadow Justice Minister he was, obviously a big Corbyn backer, one of the main protagonists and champions, of the Corbyn regime. He said, we need to fight back, not triangulate. We will analyse the result.
Can you translate that then for us, Beth?
He's basically saying the project will continue. He's basically saying we need to continue fighting on the Corbyn project. We're not going to move to a Blair area where we begin to triangulate, i.e. try and appeal to lots of different types of voters through our policies. And I think that that's something to watch for. Who takes control of the party? Do they put it back to a more centre ground position? It was the most radical manifesto. It was double the amount of public spending that had been seen in 2017. It was almost like Corbyn was trying to make the manifesto so radical that it was such a distance to travel to get to a different type of a Labour Party. And just in terms of the runners and riders, who would I have my eyes on? I think we need to look at Keir Starmer. I think you've got Emily Thornberry. There's Jess Phillips. Yvette Cooper, will she make another run for it? Lisa Nandy in Wigan. I mean, it might be that they decide that they need a leader who isn't a London-based MP.
OK, well, we've also been... John Burke, just quickly on that.
And I just
and Rebecca Long-Bailey, of course.
Rebecca Long-Bailey, who we were talking to, didn't throw her hand to the ring there.
I very
Corbyn
much
choice.
identify with what Beth has said. I think there will be a very strong body of opinion in the Labour Party that is absolutely determined this time round to get a woman. There does seem a certain irony about the fact that, other than for purposes of acting leadership for relatively short periods, the Labour Party has never been led by a woman. Now, there are lots of good female candidates, there are good male candidates, but I've just got this sense that there will be a very strong appetite for a female candidate. OK, watch this space on that. We're also watching the space, we've been talking about it, the effect on the Union, the United Kingdom. You may have heard me talking earlier to the leader of the Scottish National Party, Nicola Sturgeon, saying that the performance of her party was, well, a clear message, she was saying, to Boris Johnson and to Westminster, that there should be a second independence referendum in Scotland. And in Northern Ireland, they're also voted to remain inside the European Union. We are looking at the situation where there will be, for the first time now, more nationalist MPs elected than unionist ones. Thoughts to conjure with, and going to be analysed now by our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
Thank you very much indeed, Dermot. Yes, if you look at Scotland to start with, the turnout in Scotland is actually up. In the rest of the country, it's down, but in Scotland, they turned out about 2% more. And the SNP are the big winners. Their share of the vote has gone up to 45%. Uncannily, that's the same amount that the independence cause got in 2014. And the SNP have won 13 seats tonight, the last of which, Gordon, was retaken from the Tories, you heard just in the last 20 minutes or so. That is bound to put questions about whether or not there could be another independence referendum over the course of this Parliament. But then you cross the Irish Sea and you look at Northern Ireland. There again, the picture is being redrawn. It looks as if, as it stands at the moment, with one seat left to declare, it looks as if the SDLP and Sinn Féin, the two nationalist parties, have 8 seats, and the DUP also have 8 seats, with the DUP actually taking a smaller share of the vote, 32% or so, than the nationalist parties, which are combined on about 35%. There has been lots of talk of the impact of Northern Ireland and its place in the Union, particularly given the structure of Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. I suspect that the results tonight will put further pressure and generate further questions on that in the days to come.
OK, Sam, yes, plenty of talking points there. We are hearing a result is imminent in Bury North. Now, this was a seat that Labour took from the Conservatives at the last election. The Conservatives want it back, and on current form would have a pretty good chance of doing so. We'll have a look at that as and when it declares. But John Burke, on that issue of the Union, we heard Nicola Sturgeon saying, right, and can you clear this up for us? Because I keep putting it to SNP representatives, including the leader. Well, how do you do it? OK, so you're saying this is a clear message to Westminster, but if Westminster won't legislate, we will deal with that in a moment. Bury North is declaring. OK.
Alan Charlie, Green Party, 802. Daly James Barry, the Conservative Party candidate, 21,660. Frith James Richards, the Labour Party candidate, 21,555. Lloyd Johnson, Gareth David Lee, Liberal Democrat.
OK, they've taken it back pretty much on trend there. The Conservatives, that counts as a gain. Very narrow, though, very narrow indeed. James Daly there with 21,660 and James Frith for Labour just behind there. Look at that majority, just over 100, 105. The Brexit Party and the Lib Dems both losing their deposits in Bury North. I wonder if I can get back to John Burke on that issue Sam Coates was touching on there, of the Union, in particular Scotland, where Nicola Sturgeon now says they have this loud clarion call for another independence referendum. How does it happen if Boris Johnson will not legislate for it?
Well, it remains to be seen. It's a juxtaposition of political advocacy by the Scottish National Party on the one hand against legislative power, the power of initiative, on the other. The position, as I understand it, is very straightforward in constitutional and legal terms. The power of initiative lies with the UK government. It is for the UK government to decide whether such a plebiscite, whether such a referendum, whether such a public poll can take place. Now, I suppose if the government refuses, which I confidently expect Boris Johnson's government will refuse to allow such a referendum, there's nothing to stop Scotland going ahead with a public vote of its own.
An
but it would be
indicative vote.
declaratory or indicative. It wouldn't have any binding effect. So it seems to me that ultimately it comes down to a matter of politics, possibly of negotiation, but certainly of politics. And if the UK government, which has won the election by a thumping majority, simply says, we will not do this, it will not, at any rate, for a very appreciable period, happen. That said, if for a very, very long time, for many, many years, there is a push from Scotland, you know, there may be a sense that politically such a request has to be acceded to at some stage. But I don't think it's going to happen any time soon, I'm bound to say.
OK, listen, we're waiting for a result in Dewsbury, Labour seat. Paula Sheriff there under attack from the Conservatives. Yet again, we'll bring that to you as and when it happens. But Ed Conway is going to tell us the story of the night so far and how the Conservatives have won this general election.
That's right, Dermot. Let's have a look here. Of course, the main objection for every political party is to get over the winning line, 326 seats, and to get into 10 Downing Street. Let's have a look at what's happened with this election. Look at the Conservative line. There it is, over the winning line. The Conservatives have passed that landmark, and now they are in government, comfortably in government there. And you can see Labour there on 200 seats, so above the 200 mark. Some people thought they might not make it that far. Will they get more than they got in 1983? A lot of people still trying to work that out. But let's have a look at how those numbers translate into our results map, our representation of the UK. There, you can see the scoreboard on the left. Let's fly past that and have a look at the new political geography of this country and how does that look? All the way from the more yellow in Scotland through to the rest of England, where you can see a lot of blue, some Labour red still, but a lot more blue than there was at the start of this evening. And we are getting now to the final stages where most of those constituencies have been declared. You can see Wales actually really eating into, in Wales, the Tories really eating into traditional Labour territory there. So some blue dots there in Wales. And then we saw also, didn't we? I mean, look up at Scotland. Look at that yellow, a sea of yellow. Perhaps not as much as we saw at the peak of SNP power a few years ago, but nonetheless, a lot more. Really clear. It's a clear picture there, isn't it, in Scotland? But let's consider as well some of the big names who tonight and this morning we have seen potentially, is it the end of their political career? It's certainly the end of their time as an MP. So starting with Jo Swinson, Lib Dem leader in East Dunbartonshire. She's not the only big name to lose their seat tonight. Also DUP deputy leader Nigel Dodds in Belfast North lost his seat there to Sinn Féin. And Dennis Skinner, who would have become Father of the House. He's lost his seat in Bolsover. He had stood there, Dermot, he'd stood there for almost 50 years. So it's a really kind of stunning reversal of fortune we've seen tonight. And who knows, maybe there's a few more twists and turns yet to come.
Ed, thanks very much indeed. Let's go to Plymouth Moor View, to be precise. Johnny Mercer. Yes, John Burgo chimes in. Of course, every time we mention a constituency, he knows precisely where we're going. Johnny Mercer, good to talk to you. You've got John Burgo here, of course, who knows your constituency and all the others inside out, as you know. Your reflections on the evening. You've crossed the winning line and are going well past it.
Yeah, look, I think it's been a successful evening for the Conservative Party. I think the country really clearly wants to move on, get Brexit done and move on to all these other things. It wasn't really a shock if you spent time out in the doors, if you read the media and spend a lot of time on Twitter. Obviously, tonight's a bit of a shock, but for the rest of us, I think it was always coming. I think the Labour Party have been peddling a load of nonsense for quite a long time, and they've been punished for it. But, you know, we need to get on now and meet the challenges that people expect us to.
What are the key ones?
With a majority Conservative government. That's what I'm looking forward to.
What are the key challenges? What do you want to see taken on head-on immediately after the withdrawal agreement is passed? Brexit is done. OK, there's a lot of negotiating to do.
Yeah,
what
so
next, then?
Yeah, well, for me, things like public services. 30% of my jobs down here are public service, public sector jobs.
Mr. Mercer, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're going to come back to you, but Winchester is declaring a Steve Brine there, who actually did lose the whip for a bit, trying to get back in Winchester. Let's listen.
George, Labour Party, 2,723. Brine Steve, the Conservative Party candidate, 28,430. Ferguson Paula Wendy, Liberal Democrats, 27,445.
Well, one of the big Lib Dem targets there in Winchester, but Steve Brine getting back in 28,430 for him, down slightly on his last performance, but not a good enough performance by the Liberal Democrats. Again, it was one of these Remain Alliance seats, the Green Party not standing there. Well, listen, let's hear more from Johnny Mercer, who was kind enough to hang on there. And your reflections on holding on to Winchester. Steve Brine, your colleague there, back in. Glad to see him, because I say he did lose the whip for a bit.
Yeah, look, Steve's a good guy, and he's a good One Nation, modern, compassionate Conservative like myself, and I'm pleased that he's come back. But we've got a job of work to do to get on with the country now and to fix a lot of the challenges that were talked about in this election, and we're very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, One Nation Conservative. I mean, do you see the party still being that, or has it moved to the right?
No, I think that's very clearly been answered by the British people during this election. Elections are won by parties that try and go for the centre ground, that try and go for the One Nation agenda. You know, fulfilling a referendum result is not extreme. It's actually honouring the result of something the British people have voted for. So let's get that done and then move on to all the progressive, modern, compassionate, Conservative stuff that I know Boris believes in and people like me are in politics for.
But how do you re-establish that connection with the public, who we all know, and it was part of the Conservative campaign, how disaffected they've got with all the politicians? Now, in a lot of those seats, Conservative MPs are replacing Labour MPs, some of whom were self-avowed socialists. How does the Conservative Party take that on board?
Look, I think what you're getting at is fair. I think that a lot of people have put their faith in us now. You know, who voted for us perhaps for the first time. That's a challenge. That's a real opportunity to go and redefine who votes for the Conservatives in 2019, 2020 and beyond. And for people like me who think we're on a journey to reaching out to more and more voters, I think that's pretty exciting. I think, you know, Boris has clearly got this agenda. He's always had this agenda. This is why people like me supported him. Brexit has sort of clogged up the machine, but you know, once that is done, we can move on to some really exciting stuff. We've got to invest in the NHS and schools and all those good things that you know, the British public want to see.
And would it serve them if, by the end of 2020, and Boris Johnson has pledged that there will be no extension to the transition period, if a trade deal is not done with the European Union, would it be serving these new Conservative electors if there were, in effect, a no-deal Brexit?
I think, everyone's kind of fed up with the constant what-ifs. Boris is pretty clear he's going to get a trade deal by the end of next year. Let's let him get on with it. Let's get it done. And meanwhile, get on with all these other things we've talked about in the election that people like me got into politics for.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, the thing is, sorry, the cheering behind you, I wonder if you can still hear me, but you know, the thing is that it isn't done. It isn't done with the withdrawal agreement. There's an awful lot more to do. The heavy lifting is still to be done.
The British people aren't stupid. They understand that.
OK, Johnny Mercer there. Thank you very much indeed. Dewsbury's declaring there, as I say, Paula Sheriff trying to hold on to a pretty slim majority there for the Labour Party. Can she go against the trend?
26,171. James Philip Anthony, Brexit Party, 1,874. Nicholas Graham, commonly known as Stanton Sir Archibald Eaton, the official monster Rig and Looney Party, 252. Rossington John Edward, Liberal Democrats, 2,406. Sheriff Paul M. Michel, Labour Party, 24,618.
Well, as I said there, Paula Sheriff defending a pretty slim majority, certainly by the standards of this evening of 3,321. That's been overturned again. It goes in the Conservative column. It goes under a Conservative gain. There's the result. Mark Eastwood elected now. Comfortable majority, 1,561. Paula Sheriff will not be sitting in the next House of Commons. It's just gone 5:30, and you are watching the Brexit election right here on Sky News. Let me take you through the headlines so far. So many of them. The Conservative Party has won the 2019 general election and secured a majority in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister, who retained his seat, says it's given a powerful mandate to get Brexit done. Jeremy Corbyn says he will not lead Labour into the next election after big losses for the Labour Party. And some very big names from all the parties have lost their seats over the course of the evening, including the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Jo Swinson, Dominic Grieve and Labour's Caroline Flint, amongst many others. But it has been a successful night as well for the SNP and its leader, Nicola Sturgeon, who was celebrating there after the Lib Dem leader, Jo Swinson, lost her seat to the Scottish National Party. OK, Brexit election. Conservatives have won. John Boko talking to Johnny Mercer there. And it's a recurring theme now. It's going to be discussed. Of course, the celebrations. But it's what do we do now, really? We do Brexit, and they've termed it rather narrowly, get the withdrawal agreement passed. But then you've got a big majority, some big opportunities, and maybe some big problems too.
Well, there are going to be lots of big problems because governing is an extremely taxing and challenging business, and there are all sorts of problems, some of which are intractable. I think the difficulty really with the Conservative manifesto was that it was thin almost to being threadbare. There was a number of very, very small, possibly valid, but very small ideas in it. But it was obviously designed to be a safety-first approach and indeed to be a focused manifesto, focused overridingly and overwhelmingly, almost to the exclusion of all else, on the delivery of Brexit. Now, that had the advantage that all the resource, all the intellectual resource, all the campaigning resource was focused on that one subject. But it did mean that there was a huge void. There was a blank page. And it seems to me that in manifesto terms there is, dare I say it, a third way, to use Blairite terminology. You can have ridiculously loaded manifestos that have got far too many things in them, given that most people don't read them anyway, or you can have a virtually blank canvas. And it seems to me that the Tory manifesto was a virtually blank canvas. Now, the opportunity of that is that Boris Johnson can fill in the pages, and it's up to him and others to do so. And if we're going to get a flavour of what this...
Well, we're asking for flavours, aren't we? I mean, Beth Rigby were talking then pretty soon about a recast cabinet. We had Dominic Raab on. It seems an age ago, held on to his seat quite easily in the end in Isha and Walton. Didn't seem sure if he's going to stay as Foreign Secretary. Here's Sajid Javid will. But that personnel will tell us a lot, won't it?
Yeah, look, it was interesting in the campaign. There was only one cabinet minister that Boris Johnson publicly said, I'm keeping them in the job, and that was Sajid Javid, the Chancellor. So Sajid Javid is nailed on, but everyone else he wouldn't comment on. And yes, he will get to pick his cabinet. Now, I have to say that given he only selected this cabinet in July, he's only been Prime Minister for just over 100 days, I wouldn't expect a gigantic reshuffle at this point in time.
But it was to send out a message, get Brexit done. Priti Patel, Dominic Raab in there. On the hard side, Jacob Rees-Mogg brought into government. He doesn't necessarily have to keep them there, does he?
He doesn't have to keep them there, but he's going to get a very different party. It's going to be a very different makeup in his parliamentary party now. There's going to be a lot of new people who have to learn the ropes, and he's lost a lot of big beasts as well. So maybe he will sort of sit and think about that. I wouldn't expect a big dramatic reshuffle. He doesn't need to be radical right at this moment. The focus will be for Boris Johnson, not what his cabinet looks like. It will be getting the withdrawal agreement bill and the Queen's speech through the Commons before Christmas, because he promised people that he would get Brexit done, get the withdrawal agreement passed by the end of January, and he needs to get a reading through the Commons before Christmas, doesn't he, John?
Yes, okay, right. Much more on that coming up, but let's bring you up to speed. It's 5:38, just turned in the morning, and the Conservatives have won the general election. And Sky News can now project the size of their majority. And this is it. The Sky News projection is that the majority will be between 78 and 82, the highest majority for any government since 2001, the Tony Blair years. We hope to hear from our election analyst, Professor Michael Thrasher. He's been involved in that projection pretty soon, but he's getting a seat put in there. He'll be with us very soon. Come on, Michael. We've got room for you. I know it's early in the morning and you've been up all night.
Very informal.
Have a seat. You've got your microphone on. There you are. No formality now this time in the morning. Well, no, tell us about that. I mean, the size of that majority. I said it's a Blairite majority.
Yes, and let's just remind ourselves of what we said at 10 o'clock with the exit poll. We said a majority of 86. And this projection, after all of these results, takes us pretty near that. It's only 2 or 3 seats out for the Conservatives. So I think that's a remarkable performance by the exit poll.
How does it do it? How does it get it so accurately? I mean, you're involved in it. This is, well, 2 back-to-back and plenty more before that.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, what happens is that you make a forecast on every constituency, and then you add all those probabilities up and you come up with a number. And if you examine the detailed entrails of all the results, the exit poll has missed some or it's overshot some. And you kind of hope that the error more or less balances out, which it has done.
Can I ask you, I've been dying to ask this, how stressful is it? How stressful is it having to do the exit poll and then waiting all night to see if you're right or wrong? Do you get really stressed or...
To be honest with you, it is so exciting waiting for that initial view of what the exit poll is telling you. And it told us it was quite a sizable Conservative majority. But then as more Labour voters come out during the day, the size of the Conservative majority, did reduce. And it reduced all the way through the day until we got to that 86 figure.
But you were expecting a majority. Well, you said to me a few days ago you were expecting a majority, didn't you?
I knew, I sort of thought, yes, there will be a Conservative majority. What I didn't, and therefore I was pitching it around about 40 or 50. But I also added that if Labour imploded in some parts of the country, which...
Well, it did.
You've seen all night.
Well, England, Scotland and parts of Wales.
Yes, and therefore it was going to increase the Conservative majority. And, so to get a majority like this, and the difference between a majority of 78 or 82 is 3 seats.
Yeah.
So we're waiting for St Ives, right? If the Tories lose St Ives, obviously their majority goes down. If they lose Cheltenham to the Lib Dems, so there are little
still waiting
stories
for those,
going on there. But this is easily a working majority for Johnson, and as you say, it's the largest majority since Blair in the 2001 general election. So it's an amazing performance, really.
And it's after 4 Conservative administrations. Of course, some of them have been truncated for the reasons we all know about. But is that unprecedented to put on so many seats?
Well, certainly in the modern era, to add votes in the way that the Conservative vote share has increased over these elections. But I think it also reflects upon the poor performance of Labour as well. I mean, the Conservatives look good because Labour have performed so poorly. And the problem was all along that Labour was having to fight on 2 fronts. It was trying to defend its seats in strong Remain areas, and it was trying to defend those seats in strong Leave areas, you just can't fight on two fronts. And they end up with an ambiguous position on the most important issue of the day in the Brexit election, and they pay the price for that.
Could you say also that although Boris Johnson's taken the spoils big time tonight, that Theresa May did a lot of the groundwork for him in 2017? Because a lot of these seats, it was the same strategy, really, wasn't it? And a lot of these seats were swinging anyway to the Conservatives, but she just missed out,
she
like in Wales.
weakened them and he gave her the final heave.
Yeah.
In one sense, yes. In another sense, you know, what's been happening in these constituencies is that there's been demographic changes taking place. And we've focused in our campaign coverage on what's been happening in many towns and contrast that with cities, so that Labour has performed OK in the cities, but it's not performed very well in the towns. And the Conservatives just marched into these areas and occupied this ground. And it will take the Labour Party, I think, more than one election to recover from it.
So John, I want to bring in John Burker. John Burker, it's that time in the morning. Now, I know you've observed many of the MPs up close and personal over the years in the House of Commons, and you're quite good at giving us a flavour of how they speak. How might we imagine Boris Johnson addressing the troops after this tremendous victory?
He'll get a hero's welcome. He knows that very large numbers of those new members have arrived in the House thanks to him. And very importantly, they know that they are arriving in the House of Commons very much thanks to him. So although, of course, it's customary for Conservative leaders and cabinet ministers, as Michael Gove did earlier in the proceedings, to say, well, we've got lots of wonderful candidates around the country, and all of that is no doubt true, and each party can say that. The truth is that the leadership matters. The framing of the narrative matters. The passion and energy of the communication matter. And those people who've come into the House of Commons the first time will feel an overriding sense of gratitude to the Prime Minister, and as good boys and good girls and appreciative boys and appreciative girls, they'll want to support
They'll fall into line. What about, the course of the campaign? What about the oratory? You know how you've heard plenty of good speeches. You made a few yourself. You made plenty yourself. How is Boris Johnson measured on that scale, in your view?
I've never myself regarded Boris Johnson as an orator. He can be very witty. He can have a deft turn of phrase. He's got a certain aplomb and panache. I'm not sure that many people would call him an orator, but, he has something about him. He is obviously an intriguing and, to many people, charismatic character. There are many criticisms that can be lobbed at him. But look, tonight, this morning, he has clearly won. He's won big. He deserves the attention of the country and the opportunity to put into practice his philosophy, his programme and his policies.
And Beth, how has he done it? Eton educated, with plenty of others in that cabinet, gone to these areas of the country where, they wouldn't allow a Tory dog in often in the past.
Yes, but...
How's it been done?
Look, if you actually look at the ratings of Boris Johnson through the campaign, he's got less popular with the public, OK? So he started off with pretty good, and I've got them here. I don't know if I can find them in time. But he started off with quite good favourability ratings, relatively, and he actually ticked downwards in the election, and actually Jeremy Corbyn managed to halve Boris Johnson's lead. So I just want to frame it in... Basically, it's not because the country really loved Boris Johnson that the Tories got this majority. As I was saying in the campaign, it almost became a race of which of these two people is the least repellent to you, to be honest.
And it was Brexit fatigue, Beth, was it not?
But the messaging and the message discipline, and you've got to give it to that Vote Leave team in number 10, the guys and the girls that did the Vote Leave campaign in 2016 with Take Back Control. They regrouped, they went into number 10, they were running a government, but really they were running a campaign machine again, and they came out with Get Brexit Done, and it was so powerful. And if I say to you, what was Labour's strapline in the election? Do you know what it was?
Well, it was, let's have a renegotiation. That'll take about 3 months, and then we'll have another referendum, and I might or might not campaign in favour of it.
My point is, you know when a party has got a good message. We did a couple of focus groups, and people were parroting back, well, I just think get Brexit done.
Yeah.
And when people are unprompted running out your slogans, Labour's this time was time for change.
Yeah.
But it didn't cut through in the way that Get Brexit Done did. So it was just a very, very well-executed
and the Tories
campaign.
didn't take risks. They didn't take risks. I suppose there was the risk of the election, but beyond that, as far as the framing of the manifesto and the narrative was concerned, they didn't take risks. They closed down the negatives, and they resisted where they felt they could.
And you mentioned
any scrutiny.
And
that they
to
didn't
be fair to Boris Johnson as well, he did have impressive message discipline in all the press conferences, in all the interviews.
Just stuck to
he
those lines.
kept that. It was that message on loop, and he did do that. He did do that.
Well, he did do it. Yes, I remember those head-to-head debates. Every answer was, well, after we get Brexit.
We were playing Get Brexit Done bingo.
We'll invent. Yes. Ed Conway is standing by because we want to examine a very important feature of this election campaign. Do you remember all this talk about all the new registrations that had been taking place, the millions of people that were apparently registering, and it was thought that many of them were young people and would vote to not get Brexit done, that they'd form another youth quake, which actually didn't happen in 2017. Did it happen? Any of it in 2019?
Yeah, that was it. And everyone talked about it in 2017 and said there is a youth quake. And then actually, when the British Electoral Survey looked at it, they found maybe it wasn't really a youth quake. And it's worth just looking at what we know so far from the data that we've got here. Before we do that, though, I want to show you just, for me, this is perhaps the best way of looking at the results that we've had so far, because you get a sense of where the gains are coming from for the Conservative Party and where the losses are coming from the Labour Party. So have a look at that top thing there. There you have the Tories, 355 seats. And let's move across to the right, and you see 56 gains for the Tory Party. You see that up there? Let's add on who those gains have come from. And then you can see 53 of those gains have come from the Labour Party, 3 from the Lib Dems, and then none from the other parties. And then over on the other side, you can see the Tories have had 10 losses to a variety of parties. And now look at Labour. I mean, it's stark, isn't it? 1 gain net from the Tory party, and just have a look at this. Over here, 59 losses. 59 losses, and 53 of them to the Tory party. And we've covered a little bit, perhaps some of the demographic reasons why that might well be. Brexit being a large part of it, it must be said. But let's look at another question, which is age and youth comparison, you know, just the proportion of people below the age of 45 within particular constituencies. And here we have 2 ends of the spectrum here. Norfolk North, one of the oldest constituencies in the country. So the proportion of people under the age of 45, 29.1. So one of the oldest. And partly, that was a Conservative gain before, worth pointing out. Conservative gain from the Liberal Democrats. Norman Lamb, their former MP there. And then here we have a Labour gain from the Conservative. That Labour gain from the Conservatives, it is in Putney, where it's one of the younger constituencies. And if we take all of these constituencies across the UK, Norfolk North around there, and plot them against how old people are, let's move those over here, you can see the different picture, the changing picture of Britain's political landscape. The older the area is, these are the older areas of the UK, the more blue they are. Look, the more blue they are. That's Norfolk North over there. The more blue they are, the younger they are, the more they go for Labour. You know, this is a real change in the landscape in the UK happening over the course of this election, Dermot.
The demographic divide. Ed, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, now, the Brexit election may nearly be over. Well, it is over. Formally, the Conservatives have won, but the reaction to it, of course, has barely begun. My colleague Kay Burley has a special edition of Kay Burley at Breakfast, live from Westminster in a few minutes' time. And Kay, what a night, what a morning.
Indeed, so brilliant work, guys, during the night. You knocked the spots off the rest of them, both you, Beth, and the rest of the team. You've done an absolutely fantastic job. Headlines of the night, a massive Tory win and the scalps of the leaders that they have claimed along the way. Nigel Dodds, of course, who is the Westminster leader of the DUP, he lost his seat. Jo Swinson, the Lib Dem leader, she lost her seat. Richard Tice, the chairman of the Brexit Party, he didn't even get a seat in Hartlepool. And Jeremy Corbyn, it's a moot point as to whether or not he has resigned, but certainly he's handed in his notice, and he said after a period of reflection he will no longer be leading the Labour Party. To reflect on that, talking points with Will Walden. Will Walden, you'll know, he was the former pressman for Boris Johnson, managed to get him elected as mayor. Craig Oliver, he'll be here. He did the same for Cameron. Alistair Campbell, you'll know him. And Polly Mackenzie, special advisor formerly to Nick Clegg. All of that to come, and I've got a funky set as well here with the Palace of Westminster just behind me. All of that to come in just a few moments' time. But for now, back to you.
Kay, and our funky set there. Quite a few results still to come in as well, so stay with Kay for all that. Now, listen, Boris Johnson, we've been talking about the triumph for the Prime Minister. We've got some audio. We've heard him speaking to some of the workers at Conservative Party headquarters a little bit earlier this morning. Let's listen in.
It's a day that I think many of us have dreamed of, a day when the Conservative Party genuinely speaks for every part of the country. We have won, or are winning from Workington to Woking. We've won in, hang on, I'm going to get this right, in Bishop Auckland, in Darlington. In seats that Conservatives have not won for 100 years, or more. Wrexham. Tony Blair's old seat in Sedgwick. We've turned red car, blue car. We've won in Clwyd South, which I first contested 22 years ago and was soundly thrashed by a bow-tie biochemist. And look at us now.
Well, an ebullient Boris Johnson there recorded at Conservative Party headquarters, congratulating the staff and all the workers on a incredibly successful campaign. Got a couple of minutes, guys, in this studio before we hand over to Gay Burley to sum it all up. What do you take away from an extraordinary evening, Gay?
Well, my first takeaway is there is a Prime Minister that took a big gamble. He could have gone down as the worst Prime Minister in recent history if he'd taken this gamble and shortest lived and lost. And he took the gamble and he won big. And now he has got a 5-year term with a proper majority to change this country in a way that he sees fit and legislate. He will get Brexit done. And that is an incredible achievement for Boris Johnson and his team. OK, John Bercow, and thank you very much indeed for being with us. Tell us, particularly with those constituencies during the course of this dramatic evening. What do you make it? What do you take away from it all?
It's an unalloyed triumph for Boris Johnson. It is a total disaster for the Labour Party, and it's an utter misery for the Liberal Democrats as a party and for Jo Swinson personally. Boris Johnson's got a terrific opportunity. He's got the power, he's got the numbers, he's got the bandwidth, both to deliver his policy on Brexit, although there are other actors on the stage, and the second and subsequent phases of that policy will take time, and they will be subject to the views of others in Europe and beyond. But he does have that opportunity, and he's got an opportunity to frame a policy for the country as a whole.
Out of time, John. Thank you very much indeed. And that's it from me, at least, on the Brexit election. Much more to come. An election won convincingly by Boris Johnson and the Conservatives. Kay Burley will be taking over the baton at Westminster as Britain wakes up to the result. But from me and the team here in the Sky Election Centre, it's goodbye. John Bercow, bring us to order.
Order! Order.
Goodbye. The exit poll is indicating it's a Conservative win, that the Conservatives will have 368 seats.
Order!
Chinyelo Susan Unwura, 21,568.
The Conservative Party candidate, 32,584.
Hi, how you doing? All right. I want to also make it clear that I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign.
Have
Have you lost your seat, Miss Swinson?
And I declare that Amy Callaghan is elected to serve in the United Kingdom Parliament as the member for the Eastern Bartonshire County constituency.
I hereby declare that the said Boris Johnson is duly elected.
At this stage, it does look as though this One Nation Conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate.
Well, that's it. Confirmation of the result. The Conservatives have formally won this general election.